Hey guys, how are all of you beautiful people? Hope all of you are doing great. And yes, this is the next part of my Pokemon world. We're the story following the birth of the strongest trainer to ever walk the planet. Going region by region, league by league, champion by champion in order to chase after his ever-fleeting sense of accomplishment. Fans scream out his name every time he enters the arena, opponents forfeit when they meet his gaze, his combat style, unforgiving to even the smallest of mistakes. Soaring above the sky itself, his figure fades from the eyes of all those who he has defeated, never to catch up. So let's start without any delay. He bowed slightly, which lightly stunned the crowd. Even Giovanni was surprised as he stared at the youth questioningly. Rex winked at him secretly before getting up and flashing the most handsome smile he could muster. It seemed to have some effect. The women in the room faltered slightly as their disapproving gazes softened up. The men, though, had their faces hardened in disgust, seemingly able to see right through Rex's actions. In all honesty, they were half right and half wrong. He did want to use his looks to gain favor with the opposite gender, but he only did so to alleviate the tension in the room in order to better receive his small speech. After all, these men were easier to convince with materialistic rewards. Women, on the other hand, were more agreeable by nature, and therefore, were less swayed by money, so looks would have a better effect on them. I am Rex Pierce. I am the owner of Symphony alongside my colleagues Gaia and Giovanni. I believe most of you have a preconceived notion of who I am as a person. But I assure you, I am worthy of your loyalty and hard work. But it will take time to prove that to you. I just hope that, until the league is over, you do your best for me. If, by the end of the league, I cannot prove myself to you, you are free to leave with $2 million as compensation. He said calmly and confidently. Everyone was stunned momentarily. Even the way they looked at Rex slightly changed. There was some resistance, but due to his initial actions, the women were the first to agree, and the rest, being the sheep that they were, soon joined in. A plan well executed. He naturally grinned ever so gently at this change. Humans were greedy and profiteering by nature. Rarely would you come across a selfless person, and those people were usually taken advantage of sadly. Eventually, they too will learn to fit in with the crowd. With the incentive of money, they would work hard for a short time. He was never afraid of losing the bet, however, since he was sure he would win. But on the off chance that they still felt that he was not good enough, losing hundreds of millions wasn't exactly a problem considering Gaia's skills. So either way, he didn't lose anything personally apart from some employees. But if they left anyway, he benefited in a way, getting rid of the opportunists and leaving only the truly loyal. Only those who stayed would enjoy the luxurious world awaiting them. He would never treat his people unfairly. Getting $2 million now but losing infinitely more was not a smart trade, no matter how you saw it. Sure, they didn't know that their future would be so bright, but that was the point. Everyone seemed content for the time being, and, although they probably felt discontent with little hope for him actually proving himself to a bunch of the highest educated people in Kanto, they were very satisfied with the consolation of $2 million. Giovanni smiled mockingly at the people walking around chatting contently with themselves as if they were the biggest winners, not knowing they had just stepped into the tiger's mouth. Shall we go to the meeting now? Rex asked as he started walking in a certain direction filled with large vacant rooms. Of course, this way, Giovanni said before taking the lead towards the biggest room. As they got closer, they saw a group of people already sitting down on one side of the table with cold faces. They gazed at Rex's party as they entered the room before lasering onto Rex as he took the middle seat opposite them. There was a middle-aged man with his hair starting to grey at the sides. Beside him was a charming beauty in a suit with black-rimmed glasses and strawberry blonde hair. She had a calm expression on her face and carried a briefcase with her. Everyone else was generic, computer-generated looking assfools that he didn't even bother to glance at. His gaze didn't linger on the lady since her looks were just not up to par with what he was used to. Not many women could, in all honesty. Elisa had godly genetics that were almost impossible to come by. He really counted his lucky stars on that one. As he was thinking about that, the man in the middle, as well as the women to the side, gazed at Rex, as if assessing him. They looked at his appearance, his mannerisms and finally his eyes. They instantly noticed he was absent-minded, which caused them to frown. Ahem. Mr. Pierce. Rex interrupted. His hazy gaze cleared and immediately sharpened to the extreme along with his aura. In the eyes of the people across from him though, he changed from a teenager still wet behind the ears to a general who had been through hundreds of battles, who had seen the true face of the world and gazed into its many secrets. He gave off a completely different vibe from a second ago. Even the people who came with Rex, including Giovanni, were stunned as well. The marketing team began to reassess their previous perceptions of the man. Giovanni only smiled slightly and nodded in his heart. He was glad he met this kid. Rex himself wasn't completely aware of this. After all, the only thing he did was become serious, but the memories of his past life along with his experiences, although they were gone, the aura they carried and nurtured still remained. A sort of echo from his former self. Yet it was nowhere near as intense as it was in his last life. If these people felt that aura, they would have paled instantly, like children staring at a wolf. They would have felt tightness in their chest, and a suffocating feeling in their lungs. What they were feeling now was just the smoke after a long fire. The woman to the side frowned slightly. This wasn't going to be as easy as they'd hoped. They tried to bring the momentum to their side by starting the conversation, but the seemingly innocent and naive little boy immediately cut them off, asserting his dominance over the conversation and stopping any traction they might have gained before even starting. The middle-aged man was fuming, but the situation called for a calm and composed approach, so he was forced to swallow down his anger. Rex, my name is. Why is there no tea? I thought we were going to have tea. Oh, bring some coffee and biscuits for the guests, they might be hungry. Rex interrupted again before staring at the man standing next to the door. The tension in the room instantly increased by several degrees. Everyone stared at Rex with incredulous expressions before turning to look at the man by the door, who was now sweating bullets as he contemplated running away. He couldn't handle their gazes at all. Yet he was secretly astounded at the composure this young boss of his had to be able to stay so cool under pressure from the League. After all, the League was the governmental body spanning several regions. They had a massive influence over everything, like a behemoth that swallowed boats that strayed too far from shore. To blatantly insult them like this and act like it was nothing, traces of admiration sparked in the young man's heart. Yet he still ran away to get the tea, coffee and biscuits like he was told, lest he became the target of the League officials' venting. As soon as the young man left to do as he was told, everyone's attention swapped back to Rex, who was now leaning back on his chair looking out into the rainy city with a careless smile on his face as if he was sitting alone. Crazy bastard, Giovanni said with a nervous smile. He really didn't know where this kid got the balls to do that to the people who had all the power in this conversation. But in a way, he also understood that if he played the passive role, not only might he not get what he wanted, but they might rip him off to get more benefits. In a negotiation, that was an unacceptable outcome. Whoever had the momentum and power in the conversation had the strength to take more and give less. That started with who dominated the early game. In this instance, Rex not only stopped their momentum flat in its tracks, but he also demonstrated that he was not someone who could be carelessly dealt with. This both elevated his standing in the conversation and also gave him more breathing room to develop this starting advantage further. It allowed him to demonstrate his cards. If his position was passive, he might not have gotten even a word in, and throughout the whole discussion, he would have been a puppy in the corner listening and nodding. So, although he was surprised, Giovanni very much approved of this outcome. He secretly looked opposite the table at the neutral expressions on their faces. Clearly, they weren't amateurs either. But the twitch from the brows gave away the irritation they felt deep down. Especially, the middle-aged man. Giovanni was rather curious about why he was so intolerant and unprofessional. After all, shouldn't he be the one leading the charge from his side? To be so emotional was unbecoming. It would be very detrimental to his side of the deal if he couldn't rein it in. He wasn't complaining though, since this was better for his side. The more emotional the opposition got, the better the benefits they received by luring them into traps. But his instinct, which culminated after years of dealing with people, told him that the woman next to him, who was quiet and still as if she wasn't even in the same room, was probably the real leader. Or at least someone of higher authority. He wondered how this was going to play out. The room was silent as they waited for Rex to speak. The middle-aged man wasn't going to talk just to be interrupted again, so he sat silently and waited for the youth to talk. Yet much to his annoyance, Rex remained silent and patiently waited for his tea to arrive. The young man didn't dally and returned very soon with a tray. As he opened the door, the smell of tea and coffee wafted out, invigorating the group. It seems that Rex's decision to bring them something for lunch was a wise choice. Perhaps a ploy to get on better terms. Giovanni wondered curiously as he put 2 teaspoons of sugar into his tea before taking a sip. Rex also prepared his tea to his preference slowly. He finally put down the cup of tea after taking a long sip. "Do you like the tea? I got it from my colleague here," he said. "It's from the rare farms in Huan with exclusive sales to a small crowd. I hope it's to your liking," he said amiably. The opposition was quiet for a moment before one of the men to the side nodded with a slight smile. "This is a wonderful tea, thank you," he said succinctly. A stiff and forced smile hung on his face. "Well, now that we have something sweet, why don't we get down to business? Mr. Rodriguez Sanz, Miss Penelope Green, Alfred Samford, Gerald Zamboni." He began to name all of them one by one, looking at the middle-aged man as he did so. "Mr. Sanz, as I have it, you are here to answer the proposition we sent to you 2 weeks ago, yes?" Rex asked, downing the rest of his cup of tea before making himself another one. Rodriguez was momentarily surprised before a small frown appeared on his face. They shouldn't know who he was since they didn't introduce themselves. Even when they entered, they simply gave a league identification code without any ID. It couldn't be faked, and it was impossible to impersonate since it changed every 2 minutes. He realized that this person was rather mysterious. He remembered back to the information. Gaia, one of the core founders of Symphony, was completely untraceable. Even the League, who had access to absolutely everything, couldn't find this person. When they tried, a skull appeared on the screen, advising them to stop since they wouldn't find anything. It was a blatant mockery. They came here today to see if they could extort as many benefits as possible from them before mercilessly restricting the movements of their organization. But looking at the man before him, He felt like this was not going to go as well as he predicted. "Mr. Sands?" Rex asked again, snapping Rodriguez out of his thoughts. "Right, we are here to personally discuss our cooperation in more detail," he said sternly. The meaning was clear. They refused the initial offer and came to discuss better conditions. But Rex couldn't help but shake his head. Gaia was right in the end. These people just couldn't be content with what he was giving them. He wanted to just end this with some nice discourse, a friendly chat and some tea or coffee. Everyone is happy and they all go their own way. But once again, human greed prevails. He had no other choice but to go with Gaia's method. He slightly laughed, causing the budding amiable atmosphere to suddenly grow colder. Tension once again clung to the room. He gazed at everyone who were now stiff and tense and waved his hand from side to side as if attempting to dissipate the heavy atmosphere. "I'm sorry, I should explain myself. Better yet, why don't I let my partner explain?" he said with a playful expression. Everyone was once again gobsmacked at his attitude. Thump. 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 The sound of heavy footsteps made its way towards the room in a steady rhythmic pattern. Soon a 2-meter-tall shiny robot came into focus before gently opening the glass door with its metal hands and walking in. Its red eyes and intricate layout astounded everyone in the room. Even Giovanni was shocked as he stared at this groundbreaking advancement in technology before his every yes. Gaia walked in and sat down in the empty seat that was to Rex's left. Finally, everyone understood why that seat was left empty this entire time. "My name is Gaia, I am in charge of maintaining functionality in the company. I execute most of the decisions made and implement the ideas given to me by my colleagues. For reasons you are not at liberty to know, I have decided to appear in this form. Moving on, as my partner Rex has hinted, and if I may be blunt, you are in no position to demand or negotiate with us in any shape or form. If we are to be perfectly honest, you are lucky we have decided to not extort you for better conditions on the simple premise that we want to foster an amicable and cooperative relationship with the League. But do not confuse that with weakness. Gaia said in a mechanical voice that sounded very similar to Ultron's yet less manly and more gender-neutral. It was chilling to the bone. Everyone was stunned speechless. They couldn't believe the words coming from the robot that had appeared less than 30 seconds ago. The attitude of this new group of leaders was baffling. Did they not know fear? The silent Penelope creased her eyebrows slightly. Their attitude was beyond her initial expectations. Her thoughts froze for a moment, unable to process an adequate response. But Rodriguez didn't seem so flustered and instead exploded into a rage. Bang! He slammed his hand down on the wooden table, standing up as he did so before pointing at Gaia and Rex with a scrunched-up frown. Some veins were bulging on the side of his head. "Have you no respect? You're brave to run your mouth like this. It's true what they say, ignorance is bliss. 'Tis folly to be wise," he said mockingly, calming down slightly and sitting back down on his chair. He knew he had overreacted after looking around to see the tense expressions on everyone's faces. There was another bout of silence before Rex spoke. The innocent smile had returned to his face, and the aura of a general had dissipated into smoke, confusing everyone. Was before an illusion or something else? "My apologies. My partner was too forward and neglected to take into consideration your feelings. I believe those who have been at the top for too long, eventually forget what it feels like to have someone talk back to them." But, what Gaia said is along the lines of how this is going to go. "We will give you 30% of the profits from the sales and recognition in the development of the technology, which..." He paused and chuckled. you didn't have any part in. All we ask in return is that you let us use the best routes of transportation, waive the tax fee, turn a blind eye to my organization's activities and allow them to be unrestricted at every region's borders and their cities. When you think about it, we don't gain too much, we evade tax, which is nothing crazy considering the profit you stand to gain. We streamline travel time for the transportation of products from place to place, which if you think about it, benefits you as well, and to simply go about our business without having anyone bothering us. On the opposite side, you guys stand to gain millions, a further boost in public perception which, let's be honest, has been dropping as of late due to your negligence in many instances which I don't need to go into detail, I'm sure. So, I don't really understand where further discussion is needed, he said, feigning a confused expression. The group's expressions changed slightly at his words. Rodriguez was the first to recover. I would say that is right, but we worry that your company will not be able to cope with the monstrous demand that is to be expected. After all, you will be supplying to all regions under the jurisdiction of the League. We only wish to have the blueprint as well as increase the shares to a nice and even 50% each. Rodriguez said in a calmer tone. He was rather pissed off by this kid. He really didn't want to have to use his backup method, so he really wished the kid would agree to be extorted. Once they had the blueprint, they could start producing it, improving it and eventually create a new line of products independent of theirs which is better. This way, they could keep the profits as well as the fame. His words about their currently declining public perception hit a sore spot which he tried very hard not to react to. Please understand, we cannot give you the blueprint since that would be the equivalent of killing our cash cow. The only thing holding up this bargain and the only reason you are willing to even negotiate with us is because we hold this advantage. You don't take us for fools, do you? But, in the spirit of friendship, I will increase the shares to 40% for you and 60% for us. That is the best we can do after all. How about it? He asked with an amiable smile. The League team frowned slightly, they didn't believe he would plainly say it out loud. Wasn't there supposed to be some tacit understanding? Rodriguez secretly looked at his phone which had a message on it. It was actually from Penelope sitting next to him. Push further, I want to see what trump cards they have to act so arrogantly, she wrote. Rodriguez sighed slightly before looking up at the youth who was still smiling. What the two of them didn't know was that Gaia, who was sitting across from them, had already hacked all of their phones, alerting it of their conversation. If the robot could grin, it would have. We really would like that blueprint. How about signing a contract that stipulates that the item cannot be manufactured or sold by any other party apart from the creators for the next 5 years? Sounds fair, right? Rodriguez asked with a merchant's grin. He secretly really hoped they would agree, even though they couldn't sell it. The black market always has ways of acquiring goods and selling them. Most importantly, he was confident the League would be able to develop this tech further in 5 years' time. Rex and Gaia were currently chatting in his head, had already more or less guessed his thought process. It was honestly a good move. The League still gained money while secretly developing it further. Both parties were happy, and their partner was none the wiser. Sadly, they were dealing with Rex and Gaia, they weren't some ordinary rookies. A few moments of silence passed as everyone peered at Rex with differing emotions. The League wished he would agree, Giovanni obviously knew he wouldn't, and Gaia had nothing to say. The marketing team were simply spectators in all of this. But out of the blue, Rex smiled slightly and raised his index finger. I sadly cannot sign such a contract. He paused. But everyone thought he was done, so the League group began to frown again. This youth was beginning to push their buttons. Just before Rodriguez was about to rage again, Penelope held his arm and pointed with her chin toward Rex. The former looked over again and saw that the kid had more to say. "But I am willing to let you look at the blueprint just this once. You can have about 10 minutes to check and look at everything. Once you are satisfied, we can continue the deal from there. How does that sound?" Rex asked calmly. "PFFFT." Giovanni spat out the mouthful of tea at his words. Gaia looked over suddenly. If surprise could be shown on the robot's face, it would have certainly shown it. But this common trait was shared by everyone in the room. The League team were the only ones who not only recovered the quickest but also began to secretly cheer in their hearts at the naive thoughts of the kid. He truly was just a boy, still wet behind the ears. "Deal," Rodriguez said quickly. Giovanni grimaced instantly. He was about to pull Rex aside just then to avoid them agreeing. But there was nothing they could do now. He sighed slightly but still pulled Rex aside nonetheless. His actions certainly attracted the attention of the table, which further convinced them. They began to smile as they looked at each other. The two men left the room for a brief moment before returning soon after. Rex now sported a slightly pale face as he avoided the gazes of the League group. Now everyone was convinced that he had realized the mistake that he made. Soon, Gaia came back with a blueprint that encompassed everything from the finest touch to the intricate minute details that made up the actual tech. It was dozens of pages long. Rex sat there silently with his head slightly down and began to drink his tea. "He really has made a mistake this time," Giovanni thought to himself. This was a massive blunder. Maybe he got too arrogant and thought he could do whatever he wanted. All of their hard work had now gone down the toilet because of him. Everyone else now understood the situation. But the League group didn't care about anything and meticulously flipped through every page. What was odd was that they positioned it a certain way. They had cameras in their breast pocket that recorded everything for safety reasons. But it now came in handy. That was what Giovanni wanted to warn Rex about, but he didn't get the chance to do so before the deal was struck. "Did you get everything?" Penelope texted someone different this time. Soon a message came back with the OK emoji and a devil grinning emoji. She finally relaxed and gazed back at the boy who was opposite her with a trace of pity. That's right, boy, he had lost the right to be called a man when he made such a rookie mistake. Naturally, that was taking his age into consideration as well. He was simply too green. He alarmed her at the beginning, but it seemed to be a false alarm. Rex massaged his temples before raising his head again. He had regained some composure. "Now that you have had a look, how about we talk terms? 40% to you, 60% to us. I understand that I may have made a mistake, but we have just registered for the intellectual property of the technology. Meaning, copyright laws are in effect," he said, his face regaining some color. The League team though was much calmer and looked very relaxed. "How about we do this, 10% to us, 90% to you, but after 5 years, we can begin to make it ourselves. You will naturally get a share as the original creator, about a 15% commission fee of the total sales for the next 10 years following the expiration of the contract. We can also guarantee your use of our best transportation routes, the waiving of tax and a blind eye to all of your activities. How does that sound?" Rodriguez said slowly and calmly. Rex seemed to look pressed and turned towards his colleagues. Giovanni seemed unwilling. It made no sense, they could just say no, the extra percentage was not worth it if they would end up giving their monopoly away after 5 short years. Not to mention, they had all the cards. As long as they had the trademark rights, they could keep their position. Even if they had the blueprint, he didn't believe that Gaia and Rex couldn't come up with a better version that trumped the League. They were the creators of the tech after all. The advantage was there. They could even push for better benefits without giving anything away. He was absolutely against these terms. But suddenly, a vibration was felt in his pocket, causing him to take his phone out. This caught the attention of the League team and they slightly stiffened. Was something going to happen? When Giovanni read the message, he sighed slightly, clearly appearing unwilling, but had no choice after reading the message he received. Gaia, can you bring us the contract according to what has just been discussed? I think this is a good deal. Rex said slowly, as if he was very content with it. Instantly, whatever apprehension the League team had about Giovanni's actions immediately vanished with the kid's words. They really found it hard not to jump out of their seats from joy. He could have asked for more favorable positions. They really had no way to go around the copyright law legally. The only way to was to make it better in secret until it was different enough to call it its own product. And for the time being, sell the ones they built according to the blueprint on the black market. They finally realized why Giovanni's expression was unwilling. It was because he seemed to be the only one understanding the overall situation and their respective position. What advantages they had and what their weaknesses were. But he was being suppressed by the narrow-mindedness of this kid. Clearly he was blinded by the immense fortune dangling right before his eyes, hook, line and sinker. They didn't complain about it, all the better for them. As for why that Gaia person said nothing with their intelligence, they couldn't know. There must be something going on between them, maybe they weren't as close, so the former didn't really care. They weren't worried about any tricks since they would be able to react before signing the contract, so they would remain alert until it was signed. Soon the contract came back and both parties signed after a very careful read. Everyone on the League's side had wide smiles the moment the pen left the page. They no longer pretended to be calm. The only one who was calm was Penelope. She even felt that something wasn't quite right. But she couldn't quite put her finger on it. Now that everything has been settled, I bid you a good day. I hope to have more dealings with the League in the future. Rex said with an amiable smile. The League team was surprised before bursting into sonorous laughter. They all shook his outstretched hand one after another. Of course, many more, many more. They said, trying to hide the mocking look in their eyes. They all exited after shaking hands. The blonde woman soon came forward as the last person. She shook his hand, yet the moment she stared into his eyes, she instantly felt like she had been sent to a vast and infinite ocean. An unfathomable feeling dawned on her body. Rex leaned in slightly and whispered, "Cheers." His words snapped her out of it, and when she looked at the person in front of her, the same innocent look appeared on his face. As if nothing was wrong. His words and behavior contrasted so much it puzzled her as she left with brisk steps. The marketing team had nothing to do here anymore and left soon after. There was only Rex, Giovanni and Gaia in the room. Nobody said a word. Rex made his way to the window to gaze down at the team of League officials exiting the building with a calm expression, deep and unreadable. The League team looked up and waved before surrounding the convoy of black cars parked outside. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. On the ground, the League officials were unrestrained with their provocative words toward Rex. Ha ha. The kid is an idiot, we scored big, lads. Drinks on me tonight. Rodriguez said joyfully. I agree, how did this person even get so much money? Must be some family inheritance, the kid is a pig pretending to be a tiger. Another said. He is an orphan from Colossus, he doesn't have a family nor is he rich before he showed up in Kanto. Penelope said suddenly as she walked out of the building. Instantly the joyful atmosphere cooled, this was their boss after all. Rodriguez stopped laughing and soon became confused. If it's not inherited then where? I have no idea. No matter how hard we search nothing comes up. Must be that Gaia person's doing. They're unfathomable. Anyway, let's not dally and get back to HQ. Those nerds in the science district will surely salivate when they get their hands on this knowledge. She said coldly. But as she was speaking, a man soon rushed from one of the trucks to the side. He had an iPad with him and a panicked look on his face as he ran over. Boss. Boss. Massive problem. Big bad know-how. He stammered as he tried to catch his breath. Penelope frowned as the feeling that something was wrong surfaced once again. A bad feeling was sinking in. What is it? She asked with a heavy frown. We seem to have lost the recordings. He said with a panicked expression. Instantly the happy faces of everyone present froze like they had been hit by an ice beam. They even began to shiver slightly from fright. Rodriguez went pale as all the blood drained from his face and his knees became shaky. That cannot be. You confirmed it inside. You must have made a mistake. He bellowed, his shivering getting worse at the consequences the words he said would bring. I would never make a mistake. Inside, once the recording was sent, I immediately sent it to an encrypted server. The best and safest one. I saved a copy and reviewed it to make sure everything was there, and it was. But just a moment ago it was all deleted. I even checked the server, and I only caught a glimpse before it too was deleted. Nothing's left. The tech guy said. Everyone's jaws dropped. They could no longer remain calm and began to freak out slightly. The only seemingly calm one was Penelope. She slowly looked back up at the 15th floor where three silhouettes were standing. She immediately recognized them. In the middle Rex stood, one hand in his pocket and the other with a glass of champagne, which he lifted as soon as she looked at him. His face was expressionless, like a still lake without a single ripple in it. But his words suddenly echoed in her mind and like a thunderbolt from the clear blue sky she understood. A sense of helplessness drowned her body, she felt heavy and stiff. They had been dancing in the palm of his hands this whole time, like a dancing circus. She returned to the feeling of unfathomableness, and without her realizing it, she seemed to be standing on the massive outstretched hand of Rex, a black sky and his sinister grin gazing down at her like a god. Cheers, she mumbled in a daze as she stared up at the man. The long, black snake-like formation of cars soon left Rex's field of vision, disappearing off towards the League's headquarters, which were actually not in any region but in a floating city on the ocean. It wasn't exactly close to Kanto as much as it's close to every single one of them. It had the best security available, with hundreds of the top trainers picked from every league tournament held every year in every region. They got the cream of the crop. The Rangers, police and other institutions or organizations took what was left from the talented bunch. Naturally, this was a choice, no one forced the participants to choose this route, but the alluring pay sure enticed a few. Furthermore, the top challengers never joined immediately and decided to try their luck making a name for themselves. After all, the League and such would always welcome them as long as their skills were up to par. Rex Giovanni said cautiously. In truth, he hadn't actually been told anything. The message he received only told him to trust in Rex and Gaia, nothing more, nothing less. But as he looked at Rex's solemn appearance, he couldn't help but get slightly worried. The former slowly turned towards the man and gently clinked his glass against his before taking another sip. Suddenly, a radiant smile emerged from his cold exterior. Like the sun on a winter's day, Giovanni felt a sense of relief and relaxation sweeping through his body. His tense muscles relaxed voluntarily and without his control. There is nothing to worry about. This is what happened. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Back when the negotiations were still happening, Rex suddenly smiled. He got the brilliant idea of tricking their opposition into a false sense of victory. He purposefully acted like a nice and amiable fellow from the beginning and left the bad cop role to Gaia on purpose. From the very beginning, he had made himself to be this naive boy coming to this meeting with his parents. Subconsciously, the League officials would drop their guard against him. They would instead be more focused on Gaia and Giovanni since they seemed more experienced and daring. He had purposefully pretended to make a mistake and hand them the blueprint, knowing full well what they would do with it. But that alone would never have convinced them. The genuine reactions of not only Giovanni but Gaia as well were a prerequisite for this to work. Rex. Gaia reacted instantly the moment he mentioned giving them the blueprint. Relax, Gaia, Rex said in his mind upon hearing the apprehension in Gaia's tone. He explained the plan, step by step as if he could see the future. Gaia was surprised, but not shocked. Her monstrous computing skills instantly scaffolded the situation based on Rex's words and ran simulations based on the psychiatric analysis it had done on all of the people sitting in this room currently. This was also based on information the League had on their agents and officials that it had gained after hacking into their database. And sure enough, soon came the results that finally managed to shock it. That's when Gaia truly turned towards Rex in bafflement. The results showed that there was a 100% chance of the plan working. It was a marvelous plan. If they had asked for even a sliver more, the outcome could have been totally different. The opposition could have become more apprehensive, or bold, or an infinite amount of different things, potentially changing the result dramatically. And as soon as the contract was signed, the League weren't the only ones feeling joyful. Rex sneered in his heart, as his gaze turned from one that looked at them as equals, to something worth less than the dirt on his shoes. The only one that he still somewhat respected was Penelope. She had talent and the ability to remain cool throughout the entire thing. She never even once made an outburst. The most she did was crease an eyebrow. And although she did look down on him, he didn't take it to heart since his actions in that moment did warrant such a reaction. Even when she found out, she didn't scream, or anything of the sort. It could be said she barely reacted at all. He would make sure to poach such a talent. He was sure that when they returned to HQ they would be severely penalized if not outright fired because of it. Returning to the matter at hand, the moment they stepped outside of the building, Rex ordered Gaia to delete the recordings in their entirety. Not even a ghost was left by the time it was done with it. He stood by the window with a glass of champagne and gazed down at the ants below with a neutral expression. He enjoyed their little play. His words to Penelope on her way out were to further push her down the path he so desired her to walk down. A path that would eventually lead back to him. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Giovanni stood there in a daze before slumping down on his chair. Cold sweat trickled down the side of his face as he stared at Rex's back. Truly, these people are a different breed. he said without an inch of jealousy or negativity. He was happy to be standing on the right side, that's all. He didn't even want to imagine where he would be if he had chosen differently. Maybe he wouldn't be standing at all, but instead resting in a comfy coffin 6 feet deep. Now that this has been settled, Mewtwo is next. Get me the precise coordinates and I'll have Mordred reach there ahead of time. I have no intention of taking the long way, he said while looking out towards the seemingly infinite skyscrapers and building rooftops. No worries, Gaia said succinctly before leaving the room. The robot was no longer needed since it was in his head. The only reason it used the robot was to add a sense of pressure to the table. On New Island, deep in the ruins of Team Rocket's secret science lab, a pale pink and purple-colored Pokémon sat on a chair observing a giant monitor-like screen that flickered with a shade of green. Next to him, a woman, dressed in goth colors, a white cloth over her head, and murky eyes, like she wasn't all there. Mewtwo frowned suddenly as he looked at the screen. Dragonite had just handed the letter and left when a silver flash of light blinded the recipients. But the screen Mewtwo was staring at didn't suffer the same fate. He intensely stared at the silver robot speeding past, grabbing the letter and leaving before the blinding effect wore off. Well, more like it was the blinding effect. Flick. 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 It continued to switch to different screens showing different individuals or groups of people. All of them suffered the same fate. As soon as they were handed a letter, they would be blinded, the letter would be taken, and nobody saw a thing. Bang! Mewtwo slammed his hand down on his armrest out of rage. He glared at the screen ready to crush it to smithereens when a text swapped out the visual of the kids recovering from the blinding effect. You wish to prove yourself, to demonstrate your power. To establish a new world order, yet you know nothing of the current one. Ignorant of the secrets known only to so few. A power, greater than any other, a power with the ability to make real change. Do you wish for it? Do you hunger for it? You claim to be the best yet only experienced so little. You have been blinded by the darkness of reality, unable to perceive the light even when it shines right before you. 2 days from now, you shall regain sight, and with it, you shall observe true power. Be prepared. Blip. Boom. The screen shut off before blowing up. There was a long period of silence. Mewtwo's eyes were still locked in the broken screen. Who was this person? They seemed to have the answers he so desperately sought. He had always been spiraling down a never-ending chasm of despair. Wandering around aimlessly in search of his life's meaning. Why was he born? For what purpose was he born? Those questions continued to plague his thoughts like weeds. He tried to work with humans, but they were disappointing. Their cruel, greedy and destructive nature with complete disregard for the lives of Pokémon disillusioned him. If it was to be left unchecked, the world would be destined for ruin. Such an inferior and weak species could never be in charge of the world. But neither could these subservient Pokémon who let them govern in the first place. He simply could not tolerate that. He would take action against those who created him. He felt disgusted with anything related to his creation. And humans being the primary conspirators in the atrocity they had created would suffer the greatest calamity. He would gather the genes of every Pokémon and create better, stronger and smarter versions of them. And with their help, he would create a new world order. He would start with the trainers that showed some potential and were gullible enough to fall for his schemes. And then, not only clone them but enhance them as well. Yet his plan now seems to have been ruined by these silver creatures. And now this text on the screen had given him clues about the information he had been craving for. This person knew of his origins, maybe they could answer the questions he so desperately wanted answers to. But they also alluded to something beyond his current view. They stated that he was only seeing a part of a whole, that he was missing something. Something important. He craved for this secret. Maybe it would give him insight into a better truth so that he could better grasp the reality presented to him. He exhaled while staring at the broken screen with a deep gaze. We shall see what you have in store for me. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. The days went by quickly. Rex had nothing to do during these 2 days. He spent his time drinking tea while listening to Giovanni and Gaia talking about the intricacies of certain projects, their flaws, how to remedy them, when they should be released, at what price and targeted towards what audience. Marketing naturally attended the last two since this was their specialty. Rex didn't speak much these days, only when necessary. Solemnly did he say anything, but when he did, it was very effective at carrying the intended meaning. He gave his ideas in a timely fashion when they found it difficult or stuck on a certain area or issue. Giovanni noticed this, that the kid he had been with seemed to have gone through a small change. Before he was cocky and loud, as seen during their initial conversation between Rex and Spade. Rex made no effort to conceal his intentions or words. He was confident but slightly reckless with no care for subtlety. But looking at him now, he seemed to have somewhat matured. But in a very specific way. He was far quieter and much harder to get a read on. If the previous Rex was a confident or cocky kid, the current Rex was a young man who had calmed down by several degrees. Rex himself was only half aware of this. What he was currently doing was practicing. To be specific, he had decided to carry himself in a more restrained manner. This was because he felt that he needed to be less childish when it came to how he approached planning and enacting his thoughts into actions. He himself recognized he was arrogant, easily blinded by sudden gain, impulsive and lacked the self-restraint to look at the bigger picture in order to maximize the benefits. He had experienced the consequences of that too many times on his journey already. The first time he changed this was during the meeting. He saw the bigger picture, as if it was right in front of him. And he acted accordingly based on his looks, age and the circumstances around the meeting and their lack of information on him to manipulate their perception of himself to his advantage. This momentary shift in mentality brought him so much gain. The league went from a business partner to a charity on this mental shift alone. The benefit of controlling and restraining his impulsive thoughts and reckless side was something worth investing into. But naturally, breaking habits takes a long time. And therefore, one must practice and stay adamant on their journey toward change and progression. Furthermore, he understood the difference between harnessing the power of a calm, calculative and manipulative mindset and going too far, leading to eventually being swallowed up by it permanently. Yet his ultimate goal from this wasn't to become a cold, emotionless prick. He hated such people. But a calm and silent person gained more than a loud mouth. Who said it best? A fish with his mouth closed never gets caught. He recited silently to himself. Those who tend to speak too much end up spilling more than they intended. Whether that was willingly or not, consciously or otherwise, smart people could take advantage of that for their benefit. Yet this loudmouth part of him did still have its uses when tricking people into believing that's the real him in order to gain more later. It was a long-term personal project he set for himself. A man stood before a mirror tightening the black tie around his neck that was over a snow-white dress shirt and black suit jacket. His silver-white hair seemed to bounce light off of it and his blue eyes seemed deep and piercing. He looked at his watch to see that it was 12 in the afternoon. It was about time he got started. He gazed out of the massive window and into the distance where a massive patch of sky was almost pitch black. A storm was brewing as if a whirlpool of ink had formed in the sky itself. He smiled slightly before making his way to the roof where Giovanni was, leaning against the rail smoking and looking towards the storm as well. Without looking towards Rex, he spoke. The satellite picked up an abrupt change in weather. There are some monstrous waves out there. Dozens of meters tall. Not to mention the hurricane. To think a Pokemon could make such a thing. A monstrous feat to say the least. He said with a complex gaze. Rex was also amazed. This was definitely beyond the power of normal Pokemon. But even in canon, he was a far cry from the creation trio. They couldn't even be compared. One controlled the law of space, one of time and the other of darkness. Giratina was the most aggressive Pokemon in existence, and because of it, he was banished to the distortion realm. Mewtwo in comparison was simply a fly. Nay, not even a grain of microscopic sand in comparison to a mountain that pierced into space. Even he was scared of the creation trio. Not to mention Arceus. He had no intention of pissing off those old monsters anytime soon. After all, a single thought and he would be Thanos'd out of existence. Just thinking about it gave him a chill. Even with all the power he currently had, he was still nothing. Sure, he had potential, but potential was not power, it was the opportunity to obtain power. Many geniuses existed, yet a lot of them were snuffed out before they could show their brilliance because they couldn't restrain themselves. This was also why he set that goal for himself. He couldn't allow himself to waste the opportunity given to him. He shook his head to rid himself of the solemn thoughts plaguing his mind and focused on the task at hand. Mewtwo was still a one-of-a-kind Pokemon. And the reason he was so interested in him was that as an artificial Pokemon with the genes of Mew and other Pokemon, it technically could be altered further, becoming something beyond the limit of what was previously established. But this was all a hypothesis. He didn't know how strong he could make Mewtwo, but he would see where it led him. Mordred, he said slowly. A crack in space formed before being pried open by a set of floating hands. Chains shot out of the void which further pried it open before holding it in place, making it stable. Rex didn't say anything and walked towards the rift. Safe trip, Giovanni said. Rex waved to him without turning around and stepped through. Clang. Crack. Bang. Suck. Whoosh. The chains began to rattle before breaking, causing the rift to close as it seemed to collapse on itself. And just like that, nothing was left. Giovanni turned around and got ready to continue his work. If he was worried about Rex's safety, then the region would already be doomed. So, either way, there was no point worrying. What he said was simply a formality. The rift appeared on the veranda just outside to the middle left of the dining room where all the trainers were supposed to have been waiting. As Rex stepped out of the rift, a severe downpour instantly drenched his clothes. Rex couldn't help but laugh. It seemed that his wish of rain had been granted on many occasions recently. He walked forward with long strides and gently pushed the giant mosaic door open. Creak. Bang. The door slowly widened with a low creaking sound before a muffled slam was heard as it hit the walls where they rested. Rex surveyed the room with curiosity. In the middle was a long table filled with perfectly cooked food which surprised him. He wondered who cooked it when he remembered that Nurse Joy was being mind-controlled. so his question was answered. There were 2 fountains, one on either side of the table that, when he walked over, were actually rather deep. Most likely to accommodate large Pokémon any trainer might bring. There were luxurious chandeliers hanging from the room lighting it with a warm orange glow. He walked over to the table and calmly sat down on the endmost seat, allowing him to gaze down the whole table. He grabbed a stray apple amidst a basket of pears and began to munch on it in a relaxed manner. It wasn't long before a purple light shot down through the middle of a spiral staircase on the opposite side of the room. And a small platform began to descend. Legs. Tail. Torso. Head. Mewtwo was in full view as the platform finally touched the ground. Silence spread to every corner of the room as the 2 opposing figures stared at each other. Different emotions and thoughts coursed through their minds. Rex was surprised. He could feel the power radiating from Mewtwo. It was much stronger than when he first met the poor fellow. But it was still a far cry from his Pokémon. The only one to whom Mewtwo might pose a challenge to was Gyarados, because he was still just a normal, albeit stronger, Gyarados of his species. There was nothing fancy about him. Rex was struggling to find a suitable enhancement for him as of yet. He was close, but nothing yet. It was slightly frustrating. These days, Gyarados was quieter and very saddened. He was the weakest by a large margin. He no longer acted like the mad tyrant exerting his dominance wherever he went. He no longer played with his friends, which also affected them as well. Rex couldn't bear to see him like that, so he tasked Gaia to put everything on hold and search for the items he needed at any cost. He had to help Gyarados get strong soon. In contrast to Rex's relaxed and straying thoughts, Mewtwo was shocked and agitated by the appearance of this person. This was the person who had freed him, the strongest person who he had ever seen and fought, and the first person to ever beat him so soundly. He was sure this person had the answers he sought. What are the secrets you hinted at? Seeing how I have been blinded, please enlighten me. Mewtwo said in a serious tone, yet it also held a tinge of sarcasm. After all, what had he not seen already? Rex didn't speak right away, but instead stared at Mewtwo. A trace of pity flashed across his eyes. What a tragic Pokémon, so many beautiful things in this world to discover and experience, yet all this Pokémon ever received and witnessed, was suffering and deception. Mewtwo's face contorted in anger as it recognized the emotion behind those eyes. He hated that gaze. I do not need your pity. He yelled angrily, a wave of psychic energy exploding out of his body towards Rex with a wave of his hand. Yet the latter didn't seem fazed at all as he held up the apple sitting on the hand resting on the table, gazing at it with a pensive look. The wave of frightening energy rippled out, shredding everything into ribbons, food exploding and the table splintering as the energy wave lunged towards Rex. Yet, a meter before touching him, it seemed to have hit an invisible wall. And as the 2 forced made contact, a semi-transparent wall shining with a tinge of blue revealed itself before Rex. Mewtwo's eyes sprang open in shock. His gaze wandered across the surface of the energy shield as if trying to assess what Pokémon move it was. It was similar to Protect, yet a different source of energy powered it. But his eyes didn't linger before drifting towards the face of his adversary, where another, small wave of surprise jolted through his body. That emotionless face, fathomless deep eyes and the rhythmic tapping of fingers on the wooden table sent shivers down his spine. You must be wondering, what Pokémon move this is, right? A natural assumption, after all, your knowledge is shallow. This is no Pokémon move, however, but my own power. Rex announced. Catcher, Like thunder, Mewtwo's thoughts froze. Impossible. Humans are weak and fragile, how can you use moves? He protested instantly. Rex chuckled softly. You have been mistaken again. This is not a move, they're two professions in this world, psychics and aura guardians. As you can probably understand, psychics practice and forge a link with the psychic realm, allowing them to tap into a power similar to what psychic Pokémon like yourself have. I have only met one of them, and she was a little girl. Powerful, and with massive potential. Not just anybody can pick it up though, you must be born with this gift. Contrastingly, aura guardians can be trained, although you must still have some aptitude for you to get far, you can train others, nonetheless. They have special abilities, like the one I just used. A fighting-type Pokémon, Lucario, can also use aura, and are usually partners to aura guardians because they can help develop each other's aura abilities. Rex explained patiently. Mewtwo's expression changed slightly. He originally thought that humans were weak, fragile and useless. The only upside was their intelligence, which allowed them to govern this world to begin with. But now, he had seen firsthand something that shattered these notions. But according to his words, they were probably rare, maybe even extremely rare, considering that their aptitude must be rather high to be competent enough to use it effectively. Yet, when his thoughts reached up to there, a grin appeared on his face. I thank you for your information. It was quite useful, but if this is the information I was missing out on, I guess you wasted your breath. Mewtwo said casually. Rex was silent for a moment before bursting into a loud peal of laughter that echoed through the silent room. Mewtwo's small smile froze, and a frown took its place when he saw this. Rex wiped the tear from his eye as he gazed back up at the Pokémon. It took a moment to stifle the remains of his laugh. Do you think that's what I can hear to tell you? No, I was simply correcting your misconception. He paused and placed his hands on the table, using them to get up. His head bowed as hair fell over his face. Even those humans are not even in the same league as me anymore. Not even you. Rex said, his voice turning demonic in an instant. His hair began to float away from his face, allowing Mewtwo to see a pair of blood-red eyes beneath, cold and emotionless. Crack. Bang. Rex clenched his hands. The fingers that were comfortably resting on the table suddenly pierced through the wood effortless. Splinters flew everywhere before the rest of the table shattered. Rex straightened his back, before beginning to walk through the rubble, all the while loosening his tie with one hand, a grin on his face. Mewtwo was shocked, both by the man's words and by the monstrous aura seeping out of him. His eyes darted around his figure erratically before focusing, much to his horror, on the transparent figure of a six-armed demon floating behind Rex. Yet he didn't even have time to formulate thoughts before a deep, baritone voice echoed out again, seemingly able to shake his very soul. The history of this world, secluded, hidden deep within, depicts a tale of a god, so powerful he created all that lives. He bestowed his power upon those beings, allowing a single subject from each race to exhibit a fraction of his tremendous might. You think yourself so mighty, you know nothing. You think of yourself atop the tallest hill, unaware of the colossal mountain behind you. There is much to learn, little one. Class is in session. Before Mewtwo could react, a blur of red flashed across his eyes before a repelling force fell upon his body. A fist collided with his chest, causing him to blast backwards like a cannon, straight through the wall like it was made of foam and right into the battlefield behind him, where he tumbled continuously. A dust cloud rose in his wake as if in hot pursuit of the being that ruined its peace. He was left gazing up at the sky. He couldn't do anything to block that fist. It was like he couldn't move, like space was frozen around him. He even felt his strength being sapped out right before impact, which was then added to the existing force, multiplying the damage he took when it finally hit. It was inconceivable. Mewtwo snapped out of his thoughts and scurried back to his feet before beginning to levitate off the ground using Psychic. All the while staring at the cloud of dust with a wary look. Swish! A javelin of red aura energy pierced through the cloud and shot toward Mewtwo like a bullet. Mewtwo raised his arm and used psychic energy to stop the javelin a meter away from his body before shooting it back the way it came. Rex smiled within the dust cloud before creating a hammer out of aura and hitting the tip of the incoming javelin, causing it to once again launch towards Mewtwo at double the speed it came in at. Like a bolt of lightning, Mewtwo was struck before he could even process what happened. Like being shot out of a cannon, he was launched into the air before being pinned onto the wall where the javelin seemed to melt and transform into chains that bound him tightly. It all happened too quickly, a mere second had passed in real time. Rex formed 4 more javelins before winding his hammer back before letting it loose, like a rifle. The hammer smashed into the end of the javelin like bullets one after another, sending them barreling towards Mewtwo. The shine of the tip, cold and murderous, sent a chill down Mewtwo's spine. His eyes began to glow a bright purple that shattered the aura chains before once again managing to stop the incoming javelins dead in their tracks with his psychic powers. The battlefield turned silent as the dust finally settled, revealing Rex's figure, standing there with his hands in his pockets, the hammer nowhere to be seen. The red glow of the 4 javelins shone on the two's faces. Mewtwo frowned. Why was he so relaxed? He didn't want to waste this opportunity. He closed his fist, destroying the aura weapons before opening it again and forming a ball of dark purple energy. It continued to get bigger and bigger without stopping until it was several meters in diameter. He held it above his head before locking his gaze on Rex before launching it forward. As soon as it left his hand, a tremendous blast of air exploded outwards, the ball of sinister energy ripping apart the air as it streaked toward Rex at blinding speed. Rex slowly extended a hand out to his side, and out of nowhere, a 10-meter-long bat with a width of 3 meters spawned. With a single hand, he winded it back before swinging it casually. Yet a torrent of air swirled and churned at his mere swing, evidence of the immense momentum it carried. The shadow ball didn't even get halfway through its journey before it was mercilessly crushed beneath the omnipotent power of the bat. But it didn't stop there and continued until it collided with Mewtwo, sending him shooting straight to the side and into another before bouncing off and hitting another like a pinball machine. Mewtwo lay within the half-collapsed wall, spitting out chunks of cement and dirt in the process. He winced as he looked at his left arm, which was badly injured. But his attention was soon captured by the beautiful sight before him. The moment the shadow ball exploded, it collapsed into thousands of little pieces, like different colored fireflies dancing in the stormy sky above. Mewtwo's eyes reflected this spectacle with awe. Both parties stood still at that moment, neither moving as they simply observed. This power, granted to select individuals, has allowed them to surpass what was previously thought possible. Beyond the scope of this world's Pokémon. They have the ability to shatter mountains, split oceans, and summon meteors out of thin air with the ability to flatten entire regions. In comparison, normal Pokémon, including yourself, simply cannot match up. Even with this power, I myself am still no match for them. In a sense, what you said is true. The human body, while extremely adaptable, is still incredibly weak and fragile. Just think about it for a moment. If I am not a match for those monsters, and I'm ragdolling you around like a stuffed animal, How much damage do you think they could do? Rex finally spoke, his hands behind his back as he swept the fading dust cloud aside with a wave of the transparent figure's arm. Mewtwo's gaze was pensive, he thought about it seriously. Rex patiently waited, seemingly in no rush to continue the beatdown. Mewtwo remembered the feeling of dread it suddenly felt a few months ago. Even he was forced to his knees with no chance to refuse. Then he remembered the colossal meteor falling down on Kanto, he felt that his death was inevitable. And yet, he was supposed to believe that a Pokémon was able to do this. It was simply inconceivable. Proof? What proof do you have to back these claims? He asked. He simply couldn't wrap his head around it. The gap in strength was too large. In part it was also his ego, refusing to accept that he had been dethroned as the strongest Pokémon in existence. It was irrational, especially after everything he had witnessed that was in and of itself direct proof. Hell, the proof was standing right before him, but he simply needed more. Rex's face showed an odd expression. He tilted his head to the side with a playful smile on his lips. He understood what Mewtwo was going through, so he decided to lay all his cards on the table. Overwhelm him with undeniable, face-slapping truth. The demon hovering behind him began to fade slowly, yet seemingly unwilling to leave, but had no say in the matter. Rex's hair began to fall down again messily, and his eyes returned to their tranquil blue. You wish for proof? He said slowly. He grabbed 3 of his Pokeballs and held them up for Mewtwo to see. The unique materials and design astounded him momentarily. They were all luxurious. Yet that astoundment soon morphed into sudden horror as he felt the trace amounts of aura coming out of each Pokeball. As if primordial demons resided within, sealed so as to not destroy the universe. The mere thought of letting them out sent nightmares spiraling in his mind. This was simply the effect aura had on weaker beings. They knew Rex's plan, so they let out a minuscule amount of aura out. One must not forget that they were constantly training, day and night. Especially Rex's top Pokémon, their energy reserves were endless, and sleep lost its meaning to them. It was more of a hobby or to relieve boredom. Rex didn't wait for Mewtwo to protest and threw out all 3 Pokeballs. Mewtwo's eyes were glued on the different shapes of energy materializing. As he watched, he used Recover on himself to heal back to full. First was Machamp, his massive 4-meter-tall muscular build came into view. His golden eyes and golden fists pulsated in a rhythmic pattern. His forearms crossed each other across his chest, appearing like an indestructible mountain. Next was Arcanine, a wave of heat blasted out in every direction as his blue man shone with extreme brilliance. Even Rex was surprised, because he noticed that the color had become several shades lighter, becoming Italian sky blue. He could feel the monstrous power hidden within his body, like a flame being surpassed, and if Arcanine's grip faltered for even a second, the very sky would begin to burn. Finally, Steelix, with his 20-meter-long frame, his serpent-like body twisted as the sound of gears assaulted Mewtwo's ears. He stared into the red, cold and brutal eyes of Steelix, getting the faint feeling that if he so much as moved, he would die instantly. Rex made his way in front of them and looked over at the frozen Pokémon. You wanted proof, here's your proof, my 4 strongest Pokémon, he said calmly. Wait. Mewtwo caught Rex's words in an instant. He surveyed the 3 beasts in front of him and nodded, he hadn't miscounted. Where is the 4th, he asked, clearly puzzled as he continued to look around. Rex smiled slightly and pointed at Mewtwo's shadow. Mewtwo felt a sudden inexplicable surge of extreme panic surface in his chest, as if he was griped by death itself. He really didn't want to look down, but the curiosity got the better of him. Mechanically lowering his head down, he saw a pair of red eyes and 2 rows of snow-white teeth in the shape of a Cheshire cat's grin. He couldn't move, he wanted to but found out that he couldn't. What is it? How did he get there? Why didn't he notice anything? All these questions assaulted his mind. Yet before he could get an answer, Mordred slipped out of his shadow and appeared on top of Machamp's shoulder in his mini form. He was even laying sideways with a satisfied expression. Like I said, Rex reiterated. Mewtwo stared at the man and his Pokémon silently, attempting to calm down with all his willpower as he did so. Rex praised him in his mind, to stay calm even when his Pokémon were pressuring him with their auras, albeit heavily restrained, it was still very impressive. He didn't make the wrong decision in coming here. Mewtwo was a one-of-a-kind specimen. The latter stared at the Pokémon intensively. They were all massive, far larger than any of their counterparts he had ever seen before. And their power was immense, yet he failed to see how this was that crazy. All this showed was that their potential was almost one of a kind. They were trained well and had a lot of experience. But this was not enough to make him think that this so-called power they inherited was all the hype the man had yapped on about. They might have been laboratory experiments for all he knew. Rex was on the money. For one thing, he really didn't know much about this world. He verbalized his thoughts to Rex, who was not the slightest bit surprised. "I guess we can go ahead then," he said, yet it wasn't clear who he was talking to from Mewtwo's point of view. What else was there to show? Machamp sneered when he saw Mewtwo's confused expression. He could instantly tell what this purple thing was thinking. He stepped forward while cracking his neck slightly as he always did before doing anything. "I guess I'll go first," he said in a deep voice. Yet the mere act of talking stunned Mewtwo. This was a massive revelation. He had never heard another Pokémon talk in the human language before. They always used their Pokémon language to do so. Even if it was still telepathy, he hadn't met another Pokémon who could do so. Machamp stood in the middle of the field before closing his eyes. Silence reigned on the battlefield as Mewtwo focused on the former, waiting to see what he would do. Yet what happened next was beyond his wildest imagination. Machamp began to glow with a golden light, yet this perfect color was stained with inky darkness, separating and consuming half of the golden pillar of light, forming a sort of balance. Soon the pillar left Machamp's body and formed a yin-yang circle that began to spin, slowly at first before becoming faster and faster, before going so fast that it seemed to fuse together before shooting into Machamp's body again. Suddenly, a single ring of golden light rippled outwards. This caused a massive reaction with the Pokémon, making him grow explosively, 10 meters, 20, 30, 40 and finally 50 meters. His forearms fused into 2, his eyes turned black, his fists and feet an inky black contrasting with his golden white body that looked to contain a galaxy within. And finally, a massive disc materialized behind him, hovering several meters from his back. Golden in color was a black orb floating in the middle. An aura of awe and majesty spread out across the entire island. The black clouds in the surrounding 10 kilometers turned golden in color. Machamp's head, which was originally gazing up at the stars, fell, his eyes landing on the standing Mewtwo, who was once again forced to his knees while supporting his upper body with his arms. How can this be? How can this be? Is this the power of a god? How can such a thing exist? How can such a monstrosity roam such a fragile world? His mind was in chaos, unable to properly process what he was seeing. Yet it was far from over. Steelix slithered forward, before laying down on the ground, coiling in on himself. Soon, gears began to move explosively, and the sound of an alarm burst the shortly lived silence as spines shot out of Steelix's back with blinking red lights at the tips. They shifted forward slightly before locking into place. Arms and legs began to extend out and unfold, and his head got smaller, more dinosaur-like. Yet the most astounding thing was his size. Compared to his original 20 meters, he was now 45 meters tall. Rex had been working with him so that he could shift his height to match that of his opponent. Naturally, opponent meaning legacy holders. That way he would never be at a disadvantage stature-wise. He had Gaia develop and implement nanotech into Steelix. This would further amplify his healing ability, as well as serve the intended role previously mentioned. It had the ability to do more, such as transform limbs into different weapons, which still had to be tested out of course. The mechanical monstrosity shook its head slightly before snapping its head towards Mewtwo and letting out horrifying mechanical laughter that sent shivers down even Rex's spine. He could never get used to how scary Steelix was in this form. Arcanine howled towards the sky and leapt into the air. Mewtwo expected him to fall again, yet he never did. Arcanine began to glow with 7 colored lights as the sun pierced through the clouds and shone on his body. A divine dragon's roar echoed through the sky as the bubble of rainbow light disappeared above the clouds. Before long, the head of a dragon, with a long snout, 2 golden whiskers and horns protruding from his head came into view. His blue mane and 2 arms with long dragon claws sprang out soon after, followed by a long serpent-like body that was black and blue. And finally, his body was free, dancing in the sky as wisps of blue embers were left in his trail. Geez, so fancy all of you. What is this, a fashion show? Are you going to dazzle your opponents with your beautiful transformation every time? Chew. So useless. Mordred spat in a slightly childish voice which suddenly caught everyone's attention. Machamp frowned slightly. He really wanted to slap this little fellow, but he would probably never be able to touch him, sadly. He was the one who was most equal with him in terms of strength. He truly marveled at how so much power could be contained within such a small body. The rest of his Pokémon didn't even bother to react. This was how Mordred was, a pervert by day, a bitter grandpa by night. It gave them a headache. Mewtwo, who was an outsider, was astounded. He even nodded. The kid is right, he agreed. Yet a chilly wind suddenly began to blow. All 3 of the Pokémon present suddenly shivered. They wanted to escape. They looked at the clouds as if certain that a region-destroying pebble was going to fall on their heads soon. Mordred began to twitch like a possessed puppet awakening from its slumber. An evil chuckle escaped his throat as he slowly turned to Mewtwo. Do you know how old I am? Kid. Ha. I'm 1,303 years old, buddy. Kid, you're fucking. Mewtwo was rolling up his imaginary sleeve ready to kill the poor fool when Rex interrupted. Language. Rex said. Mewtwo was shocked. He's dead, this man is dead, he just told off this ungodly midget beast. He thought with certainty. If only he knew that if Mordred caught wind of his thoughts, Mewtwo wouldn't even know how he died. But to his surprise, Mordred clicked his tongue like a little kid, even stomping on the ground. Screw you, Rex, he said poutingly. Kick rocks. Get to it already, Rex said absent-mindedly while waving his hand up and down limply. He was already accustomed to the kid's words. Although he was more than 1,000 years old, he had been frozen all that time. And then he slept for the next 300. Only Mewtwo, who didn't know this, was pressured by his empty words. Mordred liked to throw around his age as a way to gain seniority within the group. Sadly, he just got ridiculed by everyone instead. Nobody paid him much mind. Mordred didn't take their ridicule seriously either, since everyone was playing around and they all respected his strength. But he was still a child at heart, albeit an extremely perverted one. Mordred looked back towards Mewtwo before sighing in slight annoyance. He much preferred being in Viridian looking at beautiful Twin Peaks in the baths, but he was stuck here having to deal with this. He shook his head as jade green smoke was emitted and subsequently submerged his body within. Lightning flickered within like a thundercloud. A jet black hand soon pierced through it, scattering it thereafter. A 2-meter-tall figure stood, his hair a snow white that transitioned into a black. Green smoke floated and clung to his body. A golden crown with a red crystal framed his face. Mewtwo finally gazed at all the Pokémon before him in astoundment. He had really been blind all this time. To be ignorant of the existence of such power was simply too foolish. He had really been too naive. Understanding the thoughts that were flooding Mewtwo's mind, Rex stepped forward, catching his attention. In all honesty, I was like you until a short while ago. I too thought that I was the strongest after being blessed with such talented companions. But it was through sheer luck that I am actually standing here today. It was because of my opponent's arrogance that I live today. But, even with all of them around, we are nothing compared to the real powers that rule this world. Rex said seriously. Mewtwo was stunned, speechless. It was impossible. How could there still exist something that could crush these Pokémon before him? Rex chuckled slightly. I too thought the same thing. The story I told you, the Pokémon who gave my Pokémon their powers, is still out there, and it is him who we strive to face. He is the ultimate goal. Rex revealed. Arceus, Mewtwo said absent-mindedly. Rex and everyone else were surprised. So you know. That's right, he is the one who created Mew, who created every living thing in this world, maybe even in this universe. A being like that could wipe us all out, with a mere thought. Or so I thought. You see, Mordred here is the last survivor of Arceus's last attack per se. Rex said, beginning to explain the story of Mordred. The more Mewtwo listened, the more shocked he became. He looked at Mordred with sadness and sympathy. He had thought his life was tough, he really did think too highly of himself. He sighed again, there was too much to see and experience, if only there was a way to facilitate that. He thought to himself for a fleeting moment. I see myself in you, Mewtwo, Rex said, causing the latter to abruptly raise his head in confusion. Rex smiled gently, I really do. I appeared in this world as abruptly as you did. Not by conventional means, you could say. But I was fortunate enough to arrive with a companion, nay, a brother for life. He said emotionally as he reminisced. He unconsciously looked towards Machamp, who also smiled with deep emotion. Mewtwo saw this small interaction and deeply thought about his words. He couldn't quite understand, but he understood one thing, his bond with that Machamp was inseparable. One could not live without the other. Brothers for life was truly an adequate way of putting it. I only recently came across the true secrets of this world. I came here because you are my past self. I came here because I need your strength. You want to change this world, to make it better for the lives of Pokémon. I can help you, Mewtwo. I can give you the power to stand on equal footing with them. I can give you the power to make real change. Why were you created? To be a weapon. For what purpose were you created? To wage war and to be used as a tool for conquest. That was the purpose of your existence. But that does not define you. The moment you were created, the moment you had conscious thought, you gained the right to decide your own purpose for living. You gained the right to decide your own path. I believe we both have a role to play in the direction this world heads in. I have the power to say that with confidence. And I can give you that freedom as well. You and I are two sides of the same coin. We both have much to learn, much to experience. This world is massive, and many secrets lay within it. Instead of searching individually, why not do it together, as friends? Rex said. As he spoke, he extended a hand out. A bright light shone in his eyes. Mewtwo stared at that hand, before looking at the 4 Pokémon behind Rex. Mordred was picking his nose, not giving a damn about any of this. Steelix was silent, but he nodded slightly. Arcanine howled to the sky before staring at Mewtwo with a fighting spirit. When he finally looked at Machamp, the latter gave him a thumbs up. Friends. Friends, Rex echoed with a sincere smile. He honestly wanted Mewtwo to see the wonders this world had to offer. He had only seen the horrors, the underbelly of society and the cruel nature of humans. But it is never so one-dimensional, and one cannot build up a perspective based on only one side of the story. Mewtwo was deeply conflicted. He hated humans for their terrible nature, but looking at the man before him and the trust his Pokémon had for him even when they could wipe regions off a map was startling to him. He realized at that moment how flawed his view was on this world. Like the message on the screen said, he had been blinded, unable to perceive the light even when it was right in front of him. How many trainers had he faced in Giovanni's gym? Why didn't he pay attention to how they treated their Pokémon? No, he was tunnel-visioned on only focusing on the negative actions that humans did to further prove his argument. When he looked back and reviewed his memories, he found that his actions were heavy-handed, often heavily injuring his opponent's Pokémon due to his anger. But why didn't he see the stream of tears flowing down the cheek of an innocent and lively youth full of vigor and hope? Why didn't he see the anguish and sorrow in those children's eyes as they ran out of the gym, sprinting towards the Pokémon Center for fear that their companions would die? He realized in this moment that on his path to stop the cruel nature of humans, he had ended up unconsciously performing the same acts they did. And that revelation horrified him. He grabbed his head tightly, anguish flowing through him as the pent-up emotions finally burst out after being repressed for so long. Yet a gentle hand made its way to his head, softly caressing him. As he lifted it slowly, he saw the kind eyes of Rex accompanied by his Pokémon who had changed back to their normal forms. You are not alone. You may feel like you have done something wrong, but we are only products of our environment after all. You were surrounded by cruelty, so you did the same, even if you were oblivious to it. You are not alone anymore, let it all out. We are here to catch you when you fall. Isn't that what friends are for? Rex said, half whispering as a way to better convey the gentleness of his intentions. Well, I won't be catching shit, I'm too busy to be your nanny. Bam! Machamp slapped the back of Mordred's head with a frown on his face. Time and place, idiot. He chided. They began to bicker, which caused everyone to laugh. Mewtwo chuckled slightly as he wiped away the 2 straight hairs that fell down his cheek. His laugh cut the two's bickering as everyone focused back on him. I am willing to join your team, he said slowly. He seemed to struggle to say those words. Rex knew that his deep-seated mistrust for humanity would take a while to change. But it would be made easier the more he experienced the world. Rex pulled out a customized Pokeball. It was violet-colored amethyst that was split into 3 parts. A crack down the middle that was cut off by the horizontal crack that ran along the entire circumference of the ball. Mewtwo could see his reflection in it. He was very satisfied. But when he heard of the many functions it had, he was stunned speechless. The power of technology was astounding to him. Mewtwo's face softened and gave one last look at Rex before tapping the button on the ball, which instantly sucked him inside. The ball shook gently 3 times before a ding was heard. Rex clutched the ball tightly as a slight smile made its way onto his face. His final member had been caught. His team was finally complete. He threw the ball out and with a small bang and Mewtwo appeared again. The latter looked at his hands before turning to Rex in astonishment. The living space within the Pokeball was perfect. It even enhanced his sensitivity to psychic energy, which could make him stronger quicker. "What are you planning on doing now?" he asked. Rex looked around and smiled slightly. "I guess I can give you a small demonstration," he said mysteriously. Mewtwo was puzzled but also curious. Rex returned all of his other Pokémon to their balls except for Mordred and Machamp. He had Mewtwo levitate them 2 kilometers away from the island. Machamp was left behind, much to the psychic Pokémon's confusion. A blinding light suddenly caught his attention just as they stopped, yet before he could discern what was happening the island was engulfed in a ball of white and disappeared instantly. Not even a speck of dust was left behind. There was no explosion, nothing, only the perpetual salty ocean breeze brushing over their faces. Boom! Yet this soft breeze turned into a hurricane as a towering 50-meter-tall Pokémon appeared as if it had teleported before returning to Rex's Pokeball. Mewtwo was speechless, his gaze constantly switching between the Pokeball in Rex's hand and the empty space where the several kilometer-wide island used to be. That was Machamp?" he asked with an incredulous expression on his face. An involuntary shiver made his whole body twitch. "Well, no evidence should be left behind. Think of it as a new beginning. From here on out, you are a new being, free to make the choices you want," Rex said calmly as if he didn't just witness an island disappear. Mewtwo massaged his forehead. "What have I gotten myself into?" Late at night, on the roof of Symphony Inc., 2 people seemed to float around as they held on to each other. The beautiful sound of music flooded the surroundings, as the moonlight mixed with the glow of the city nightlife below. One man, one woman, danced together, never once looking away from the other's eyes. As if locked in an eternal stare-off. White mixed with black, as Rex's black suit contrasted with the snow-white fluttering dress that made Elisa's already heavenly figure that much more beautiful and unearthly. At this moment, only 2 souls existed in this world. Rex's eyes were only filled with the enchanting and gentle face of Elisa as she smiled back at him lovingly. They did a slow waltz as they glided across the floor. They were in perfect sync, never once making a single mistake in their routine. Rex became the frame, and Elisa became the picture. He accentuated her beauty with his moves, allowing her to move freely like a fairy. Slowly, the atmosphere began to heat up as they moved faster and faster, transitioning from a waltz to tango as twirls began to mix in, the white dress trailing behind like an incoming snowstorm. Like a white cloud, she was seemingly weightless as she danced. An angelic smile permanently plastered on her face, as the occasional burst of laughter escaped her mouth. In that instant, time slowed down for Rex. His eyes widened to the maximum in order to take her in entirely. He watched as she moved in slow motion, her red lips spread into a wide smile, joy shining through her eyes, hair flowing like a river of black ink in her wake. A sight like no other. His eyes stared unblinkingly, searing this moment into the deepest parts of his brain. This was his soulmate. They danced until Elisa could no longer move. Until her feet turned numb. Completely satisfied, she rested in Rex's arms as he princess carried her to his office. She rested her head on his broad chest, snuggling tightly against it, taking in the smell unique to him, a mixture of cologne and his natural scent with a touch of shampoo. A content smile replaced the jovial one from before as she fell asleep shortly after. Rex caressed the side of her head as she rested on the couch. He fixed the strand of rebellious hair attempting to ruin her perfect face. He felt the warmth from her cheek, the softness of her skin. He slowly and as gently as possible retracted the hand that she suddenly grabbed onto out of reflex and stood up before walking towards the window. His hands behind his back as he looked out into the city. "How is the training going?" he asked Gaia in his head. "Everything is going very well. The recruits, due to their previous routine, are rather rebellious. It only took one public execution to have them back in line. Naturally, that public execution was not real, but they don't need to know that. Estimated that the end of initial training is 11 months 16 days 14 hours. You may assign missions for the squadrons any time after that. Gaia reported. "Good, faster than I thought. We need to start infiltration immediately. I'm not naive enough to believe that everything will happen like in the anime, with organizations only enacting their plans when Ush visits their region. Especially once I'm champion, I refuse to believe that I won't impact the timeline of this world. That would be too childish of me otherwise. We also need to infiltrate the black market. This could be a good way to generate extra income and keep tabs on highly influential people. They might even have dirt on certain people of importance that cannot be accessed through hacking. On another note, prepare to begin Project Orbiting Star soon. It will take a while. I think increasing the production of Gaia robots is needed. Move the factory closer to the airfield for secrecy. Shut down the factory afterwards. Maybe construct a hospital, there aren't many, to begin with. Thirdly, order the necessary materials we need for Gyarados' evolution. Let's see if we can't awaken his legacy." Roger. Infiltration missions are being constructed based on available information on the respective targets. It will be done on time. Project Orbiting Star will take approximately 4 years to build. Suggestion to move robot production factory to decrease construction time is wise. I am already on it. The factory should be successfully moved in 1 week's time. With this change, construction time should be decreased to 1 year. Lastly, I must warn you, according to the dozens of scans I have done and thousands of simulations, the chances of succeeding in Gyarados' awakening are below 1%. The reason being we do not have enough energy for it. Gyarados seems to have a very powerful legacy. Without the proper energy source, attempting to do it will most likely lead to failure. Gaia said seriously. Rex had a helpless look on his face. There's nothing we can do about it, we simply cannot find the necessary energy, and we can't use evolutionary energy since Gyarados is fully evolved. Mega evolution energy is not up to the necessary quality, we need something more. But we have to try, maybe a miracle will happen. He said dispiritedly. You can only create so many miracles, Rex. But there should be no harm in trying. All that is estimated to happen is that Gyarados will return to normal. So, we can give it a try. I have already succeeded in finding Gyaradosite via one of my robots. It wasn't in Kanto sadly, I had to travel to Huen to get it. Gaia explained. Rex was surprised. Huen. Damn, that's insane, you couldn't find any here, he asked. Sadly no, it appears that the meteor that landed on Earth carrying this mysterious energy landed primarily in Huen. A smaller chunk in Colossus, which is now the Anista sundial. Smaller pieces landed in other regions but in much fewer quantities. There was no way around it. Gaia responded. Rex understood, Huen was where most of the mega stones were located. Somehow, people still didn't know about it, which he found ludicrous. Instead, it was Colossus who was at the forefront in mega evolution research. Granted, a massive stone-emitting mega-evolution energy was there for all to see, so they did have somewhere to start and prompt them into action. In comparison, the meteor was deeply buried under a secluded island guarded by Alacios and Alacias in Huen. So not many would ever find out. But he wanted it to be introduced earlier since that would add more spice to battles in the future. Maybe he would speak with Sycamore and see what he could do. There was also Professor Kukui, who was developing teleportation as a mode of transport. This would massively decrease the time taken to transport his goods to different regions. No more need for supply lines. It was perfect. It would also eliminate one less thing the League had dangling over his head to threaten his company with. So, there was much to do after the League was over. He sat back down on his desk and began to talk with Gaia about the plans he just asked it to work on in more detail. There was much fine-tuning to do after all. Positioned on an elevated part of a large open plain, a large airfield came into view as a car made its way through the winding hills as tree after tree flashed by, slowly becoming more sparse and open. The road seemed to have been recently touched up as the asphalt was a rubbery black color, looking almost smooth and polished as the white strips became that much more pronounced. Inside the Mercedes were Rex and Giovanni, who had come here for two purposes. One was to personally see the renovations and the progress of the training, and the second was to advance Gyarados in a more secure environment. The car slowed down to a crawl as it approached the checkpoint guarded by two wicked personnel in their new attire. They carried licensed M4s and looked daunting. An automatic rising curb barrier stopped the car from going forward. One of the masked personnel raised his hand quickly as the car came to a stop. Out of nowhere, a dog ran out of the small building off to the side through a dog-sized door and began to sniff the car for explosives or anything illegal. The sound of heavy boots reached the two passengers' ears as they stomped on the ground. "This is private property, what business do you have?" he asked in a demanding tone. Most people would already be scared by the guns, the masks and the dog, causing them to crack immediately. Rex nodded with a smile on his face. He was already very satisfied with what he was seeing. Gaia was incredibly efficient at pumping out soldiers. Rex didn't speak as Giovanni reached over and gave them two IDs. They were specifically constructed by Gaia, with different levels of access depending on rank. Giovanni and Rex were at the top, so they had S-level clearance. The guard was rather ticked off by Rex's attitude and reluctantly received the cards. But as soon as he looked at the information, a layer of cold sweat instantly drenched his clothes as his eyes looked at the two passengers. He quickly returned, almost running as he did. "Sorry for the inconvenience, please forgive my previous attitude." Rex waved him off casually. "Relax, I understand, you are doing a good job. Seems Gaia has trained you well," he responded. But at the mention of Gaia, the guard involuntarily shivered, surprising Rex and Giovanni slightly. Seems Gaia was the devil to them. The barrier was lowered, and the car left. As the two guards resumed their posts, the other guard, who was on alert a ways away, came back, chuckling as he did. "Oi, why are you being so polite?" "Sorry tilde, forgive me tilde, ha ha ha," the guard teased. The shivering guard didn't even turn around. "Shut your mouth, idiot, those two have S-class ids. The one that was driving is Executive Giovanni, our former boss. The other one is the leader of the whole organization, Rex Pierce," he responded, his voice quivering slightly as he spoke. Clearly, the mention of Gaia was haunting him. The other guard was stunned and turned to look at the disappearing car with astonishment. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Rex and Giovanni had to go through 2 more checkpoints, each one guarded by more personnel, multiplying the closer they got to the actual base. When they got to the actual base, a massive wall, 20 meters tall, was present with a massive gate. Above it, soldiers in wicked uniform walked in an orderly fashion. There was one commander-level soldier yelling every now and then. And looking out in the direction Rex was coming from, a tall, 3-meter-tall bulky robot, shining splendidly under the sun, stood, unmoving at all. Giovanni was shocked as he took all this in. "Rex, what the fuck have you done to my airfield? This is like a fucking Supermax prison," he said. Rex chuckled as he observed the modification he and Gaia talked about extensively. It was incredibly safe. As the car appeared before the massive gate, the robot jolted and stepped forward, instantly beginning to drop from the wall like a bowling ball. Just as it was about to hit the ground, thrusters appeared from its back, allowing it to make a smooth landing before walking past the car and opening the gate that most probably weighed dozens of tons. There was a condition to open the gate: the robot had to physically touch the door, working as a sort of key. In emergencies, this could be overlooked to get everyone inside. It was interesting to have a key that also functioned as a terminator. Rex chuckled at the thought. Moving forward, the robot returned to its position, leaving Rex and Giovanni to head towards the main building in front of them. A massive road made of shiny black cobblestone, 10 meters wide, extended for at least a kilometer, where a massive fountain could be seen, a golden statue standing tall. It was a man, no facial features present. It had a raised spear in one hand, as if ready to stab towards the heavens. A round shield in the other, a cape behind him wearing Spartan armor. Just looking at it made Rex's blood boil furiously, as if he was ready to fight anything that came his way. Lining the side of the road, living quarters made up of several floors appeared, mostly empty since there were only 100 people at the moment living here. But it was built to accommodate several tens of thousands. Seemingly looking like a ghost city. Most of the personnel were manning the wall or training in the massive flat grass field that doubled as a football ground. He had introduced some of Earth's sports to them for leisure activity, which they found most entertaining. Getting out of the car on the opposite side of the fountain, they walked up several dozens of steps to reach the main building. The roof slightly extended outwards, held up by wide pillars. Rex really loved Roman and Greek architecture, so he had Gaia remodel it with that in mind. Bang bang. Rex's 2 feet landed on top of his desk as he leaned back on his chair, his hands behind his head as he looked out into the vast openness, dozens of mountains and infinite wilderness. His left hand drifted down like a leaf before pulling out a shiny multicolored sphere with a rainbow-colored DNA-like symbol within. He held it up over his face to let the light shine on it as he observed it in more detail. "Such a beautiful stone," he mumbled in a whisper. "Indeed, it is, so much hassle for one such stone." Gaia responded with a bit of resentment for all the effort it put in. This caused Rex to chuckle momentarily. Yet this stone has the ability to qualitatively change a Pokémon down to their DNA sequence. Isn't that why we still use it as the catalyst for our experiments? Rex continued to mumble inaudibly to himself. The stone is too valuable and proves to have more use as a material for a permanent enhancement than to be used continuously as a temporary one in battle. It unlocks too many possibilities to ignore currently. Considering that no other object as of now is able to do something similar, these mega stones are invaluable. Gaia's synthesized voice echoed in Rex's head. There is a lot of information we didn't quite know of until recently about mega stones. In Colossus, they actually aren't allowed to use mega evolution against opponents that do not have a mega stone due to the unfairness it presents. After all, mega evolution massively boosts a Pokémon's power for a short time. Even now, some suggest that the use of mega evolution should not be used period in competition. I don't personally agree since as most people see it, mega evolution is not something simple to achieve. It's not as simple as getting a stone and using it. Trainer and Pokémon must have an unshakable bond, strong beyond measure. The only reason I was able to do it previously was because I wasn't actually using Mega Evolution but instead using the initial reaction and surge in energy as a catalyst for awakening Arcanine's legacy. I don't know if I could use Mega Evolution with all of my Pokémon, even if I have a 100% bond with them. I have no doubt that Machamp and I can pull it off without question, but everyone else, it might take some time. Rex said slowly. The League didn't immediately pass a law in Colossus the moment Mega Evolution became viable in battle. There were too many unknowns, but quickly, those who were able to use it, abused it so much, that they had no opposition capable of standing up to them. The chances of beating a Mega in a Pokémon space form are simply too slim. After all, Mega Evolution is a representation of a Pokémon's future evolutionary pathway. Beating it is just not something very realistic. They are stronger, faster, smarter and possess a higher quality of energy and control over it to release far more devastating attacks. Finally, public outrage forced the League to take action. And eventually, only using Megas when the two combatants have it at their disposal became the standard. Rex wasn't surprised at all. After all, Mega Evolution was a big part of Colossus, and it would be a big part of the rest of the world soon enough. And restricting its use for fair and safe battles is best. What do you think the boss is doing on the field? Asked a grunt as he watched Rex standing far away in the middle of the grassy field without moving. You're asking me as if I'm friends with the geezer, mate. Why don't you give a guess, you dumbass, as if I would think you knew anything, you as dumb as a rock. You two bicker like an old couple. He's obviously going to do something special. Although I have no idea, it might be something useful for us nonetheless. Doubt it's a speech since he hasn't called for us. One of the squad commanders said as he walked towards the two grunts who were slapping each other like children. He looked at the mass of soldiers amassing slowly to watch when they caught wind of their new boss about to do something on the field. The two stopped fighting and also looked around. It does seem crowded now that I'm paying attention. Giovanni stood on the side, leaning against a nearby wall as he listened into the random chatter of the soldiers, but they were all anticipating what Rex would do. He was also curious. After all, it seemed to have something to do with that stone he had been carrying on his way down here. He had done so research using the keywords Mega Stone after hearing it in passing from Rex. He ended up watching several hours worth of footage on battles where Mega Evolution was used. He would be lying if he said he wasn't interested. He cast his gaze once again on the back of the strongest trainer he had ever witnessed, wondering what wonders he would experience this time. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Tap. 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 A pokeball rose through the air before falling into Rex's palm in a rhythmic pattern. He currently had a solemn expression on his face. The attempt to make Gyarados stronger had a very big chance of failing. Nothing could be currently done. He just hoped that by some stroke of luck, he could succeed. No point dilly-dallying. Whoosh! The pokeball flew through the air before exploding into a massive ball of white light that slowly coalesced into the figure of a winding serpent. The sudden movements alongside the blinding light caught the attention of everyone present. As they watched what appeared though, their jaws dropped. The sheer size and power emanating from that Pokemon's body scared them. Ruuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuuu massive red serpent covered in a thin layer of water swam in the sky, and a ferocious aura clung to his body. Gyarados had been in a rather foul mood recently. No matter how much he trained, he had reached a sort of bottleneck. He was getting stronger and bigger, but the results were nowhere near what he wanted for himself. In all honesty, Gyarados had one of the fastest natural growths on the team. He was still incredibly strong. It was just that his results were overshadowed by the urge to be like everyone else. Gyarados understood after talking with Rex's other Pokémon that their natural potential and upper limit had been greatly elevated after their enhancement. Their bottleneck was much higher up than his. This revelation angered Gyarados more and more, and he began to train even more furiously. Not even bothering to sleep or eat, to the point where he was force-fed by Rex and Machamp, otherwise he wouldn't even budge. It was incredibly reckless, but that was the downside of all these enhancements. The moment one was left out, negative emotions would begin to cloud their mind. Naturally, their emotions would depend on their species and individual disposition. Gyarados was fiery, easily pissed off and arrogant. He could not tolerate being last. So he despised his current weakness. And that would only lead to injury. Rex knew this was caused by him. After all, he simply couldn't find the materials, but that was not good enough of a reason to leave Gyarados unattended. Pokémon and trainer locked eyes for a moment. There was only silence, but Rex could feel the growing restlessness within Gyarados, yet there was also a tinge of sadness hidden within those eyes which tugged at Rex's heart. Gyarados was beginning to think he was not good enough. Rex didn't wait a single moment later and pulled out the materials. 10 mystic water drops were set up in a wide array around the now slightly calmer Gyarados, who intensely scrutinized Rex's actions. Next, 10 water stones were used, alongside several pieces of never-melting ice. Lastly, Rex put a big collar that shone with a green light around Gyarados' neck. Finally, Rex stepped back and observed that everything was in place. Gaia, is everything in order according to the placement chart? He asked in his mind. All good to go. The mystic water will monstrously boost the quality of Gyarados' water energy. The water stones will boost his physique and allow him to better control this new water energy. The never-melting ice is the experimental bit. If all things go well, he will gain that ice typing, and his ice will gain the properties of the never-melt ice, its steel-like durability alongside its immunity to fire. Hypothetically, Gyarados will be the only one capable of making the ice go away. The collar will be the link between the materials and the body. We have to remember that the quality of the materials is the highest of the highest. Each one has immense amounts of energy, but even this is estimated to not be even close to enough. Hence the use of the Mega Stone. Gaia responded. "Time for a power-up," Rex said with a smile as he threw the mega stone into the air. Gyarados widened his eyes, transfixed on the stone flying through the air as Rex's words echoed through his mind. "Roar tilde tilde." He lunged forward like a ravenous wolf and swallowed the mega stone instantly. Rex pulled out his keystone from his inventory and held it in his hand. "To greater heights we go, bud. Gyarados. Mega Evolve." Boom! Arcs of lightning sprang out of his clenched fist, connecting with the ones coming off of Gyarados in a split second. Golden light shone and expanded as Gyarados was soon engulfed within. His body began to grow, a low growl escaping his throat like rumbling thunder. The once cloudless ocean of blue above their heads was now dyed black as purple lightning snaked across the sky, and hail and rain fell as a hurricane began to swirl. Torrential winds threatened to uproot everything in sight as everyone present grabbed onto the closest thing to them. Their eyes never left the mind-blowing scene before them though. They were experiencing something never before seen. The collar on the serpent-like Pokémon began to flash before turning a shade of red. Streaks of light shot downwards and consumed all of the materials as the Mega Evolution was reaching its apex. An alarm began to ring out in the base due to the increasingly hazardous weather. A thunderous roar threatened to shatter everyone's ears before a twister rapidly made its way down from the clouds towards the glowing orb that was Gyarados. It soon swallowed him whole as the black twister rotated at ever-increasing speeds. The lightning and ice began to destroy the environment, prompting Rex to use Aura to restrain the area affected. The roars within got more brutal and bloodthirsty, like a primordial being breaking the shackles that once bound it, instilling fear into the hearts of everyone present. Even Rex was slightly shaken when he heard the sounds coming from within. "This might be bad, Mordred, you're on standby, knock him out as soon as anything goes wrong," Rex whispered, his eyes glued to the scene in front of him. His clothes billowing and fluttering, his hair in a mess, yet his blue eyes were filled with solemnness. On it, the shadow beneath his feet flickered slightly as a pair of golden red eyes appeared in response. A set of ice blue fins tore through the tornado from time to time, massive and sharp, as it followed the spinning direction of the twister. Slowly, it began to rise up, the color of his body changing once again, this time turning blue, a set of red fins slicing apart the air, his body growing to enormous proportions, far larger than anything Rex had ever seen, dwarfing Machamp in his legacy form. It was a leviathan in size, a monster of the deep. Innate fear rose in waves within Rex's chest, even Mordred was slightly astounded. "This power," Rex mumbled. He wondered, could he truly tame this beast? But suddenly, a pained cry reverberated through the sky, like a wounded god. "Bad, this is bad, the evolution is failing, energy levels are dropping fast, massive explosion inbound. The radius is estimated to be 12 kilometers. You need to knock him out fast. Gaia urgently reported. A grim expression instantly surfaced on Rex's face. He clenched his hand furiously. "Fuck!" he snarled. "Mordred. Go!" Rex said quickly. A shadow shot into the sky before a 2-meter-tall humanoid-shaped figure appeared before the Titanic-sized monster. The two beasts gazed at each other, recognition and familiarity present. Mordred was slightly shaken as he stared into the eyes of the twisted freak of nature that was currently Gyarados. But there was a pained expression present on his friend's face. "Seems you failed, you dumb snake, better luck next time," Mordred said, not passing up the chance to rub it in his friend's face. The massive serpent roared furiously before suddenly lunging forward. The tornado spun faster and faster as if reacting to Gyarados's foul mood. A massive hyper beam shot out of his mouth instant directly toward Mordred. The latter simply shook his head. "You're 1,000 years too early to be taking me on, friend. Let's get you back in your ball for a nap. Mordred said playfully. The beam of orange light passed right through Mordred as if he was simply a ghost. He had used Mirage, which makes him illusory for 2 seconds, negating all damage within that time frame along with healing him by half if he had taken damage beforehand. He extended his hand out nonchalantly and swatted to the left casually. Using Hell's Gate, a massive hand shot out of the tear in space that appeared out of nowhere at some point and slapped Gyarados across the face with unstoppable force. Yet before he could fly out, he was trapped by Hell's chains, stopping all movement. As the two moves were used in combination, Gyarados, who was already in pain and debilitated due to the energy drain, instantly fainted before proceeding to fall to the ground like a meteor. Boom! An earthquake shook the ground after Gyarados landed, causing everyone to stumble and fall, and cracks in the earth spread fast like shattered glass. Mordred had already returned to Rex's shadow as if nothing had happened. As the storm settled, the serpent-like figure of Gyarados became apparent. Yet it was no longer in his titanic form of before, but a smaller version he exhibited prior to his full transformation. Before Rex could even ask, Gaia had already responded. "What you are seeing is the equivalent of a legacy holder's passive form. Meaning that the legacy within Gyarados is in a half-unlocked state per se, similar to Arcanine before using the Mega Stone to unlock his full potential. Looking at the black scales, the white underbelly alongside the massive ice blue fins running down the full length of his back, Rex understood what Gaia was saying. Gyarados had gained a massive increase in size. Gazing at his 40-meter-long body, he was certainly much bigger and stronger, but remembering back to that sky-toppling titanic monster floating in the sky, the current Gyarados was a far cry from his full potential. "I guess this will suffice for now. It will serve as motivation for Gyarados and keep him satisfied enough until we find the correct energy source," he mumbled. Bzzz. Red light consumed Gyarados as he was returned to his Pokeball for rest. He was drained and injured. His Pokeball would help him quickly recover. Gaia was also monitoring his vitals in case any signs of abnormalities appeared. Everyone else stood there, gobsmacked as they blankly stared at the ground where Gyarados used to be. In sync, they all raised their heads to the sky, as if they could still see the monster seemingly capable of swallowing the sky whole, rending the earth and shattering their souls before scattering them with a mere glance. They all shivered uncontrollably as they remembered the wave of fear rising to their throats, the tightening of their chests, jelly-like legs, and the sweat trickling down their chins. What was that? I don't have the faintest clue. That can't be a Pokémon, right? Ha! What a joke. If that's a Pokémon, I might as well go back and hang myself from the dormitory ceiling fan. What a joke. That's no Pokémon, that's an alien. Gyarados my ass. One of the grunts was mumbling and chuckling in a crazed fashion, their faces betraying the disbelief they felt. The commanders looked at each other. They too were shocked and fearful, yes, because of the monster Gyarados had turned into, but more importantly, the small figure who slapped the living daylight out of it. They all turned to Rex, their gazes changing from respect to idolization. Giovanni grabbed his shaky left hand with his right, his eyes quivering slightly as he looked at the sky where Gyarados used to float, hundreds of meters long, like a giant cloud of doom looming over them like a bad dream. This world was able to hide such a secret from humans, and here you are, Rex, capable of taming such monsters. Ha! What will this world become in the future under your light? I wonder. He mumbled inaudibly to himself, his eyes transfixed on the ramrod straight back of the man who he truly thought would usher in a new era for humans and Pokémon, transcending all previous boundaries and creating a new world. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. It took a short while for everyone to fully recover from what they had just seen. They would have a lot to talk about in the coming days, entertaining their otherwise terrifyingly boring and torturous days filled with only training and more training. They felt like crying whenever they thought about it. Rex was now sitting behind his desk in his office, reading the results compiled by Gaia on their earlier experiment. He was rather happy with the outcome. Name: Gyarados, the Glacial Star Pokémon. O Legacy status: half unlocked, insufficient energy. O typing: water, ice. O age: 14 months old. O gender: male. O level: 70. O bond: 100%. O height: 40 m long. O HP: 750. O attack: 1000. O defense: 840. OSP. ATK: 1070. OSP. Definite: 790. O speed: 880. O ability: Dreadcold. Moves: A, Bite, Hydro Pump, Ice Fang, Rain Dance, Aqua Tail, Aqua Ring, Dragon Dance, Bounce, Aqua Wheel, Giga Impact, Hyper Beam, Dragon Pulse, Wave Crash, new, Aqua Jet, new, Ice Beam, new, Icy Wind, new, Icicle Spear, new, Mist, new, Blizzard, new, Liquidation, new, Soak, new, Whirlpool, new, Fishious Rend, new, Surf, new, Swords Dance, new. Dreadcold. All water-type attacks directed at or made by Gyarados can be frozen before erupting into ice shards that do super effective to types that don't resist it and deals normal damage to those that do, effectively giving it a plus 50% offense boost. Gyarados is unaffected by the ability. Gyarados can choose if he wants to use this part of his ability on his moves or not and when to do it. Additionally, he can now control water in gas and liquid states to shape anything he wants. Rain Dance and Haze can become lethal if used correctly. Finally, the Ice Gyarados produces instantly immobilizes the opponent for a certain amount of time depending on typing and level of strength. Fighting, Rock and Steel will be able to easily break out. Additional condition is set though, in order to attempt freeing themselves, they must be as strong as Gyarados. Fire is not included due to the special attribute within the Never Melt Ice. Gaia explained. Rex nodded slightly. This was a rather monstrous ability when he thought about it. Gyarados was clearly a Pokémon who dealt tremendous AoE damage in a massive radius, making it impossible to dodge once inside. Furthermore, if he used Blizzard and Rain Dance, not only would visibility drop to almost zero, but you are most likely permanently frozen the moment the ice touches you. He couldn't even begin to imagine what the upgraded version would be when he unlocked his full legacy. Finalizing his thoughts on the matter, he raised his head towards the television that was currently playing a live stream he had been anticipating very much. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Welcome. Tomorrow, 1 week from today, the Indigo Plateau Conference will commence. My name is James, and I'll be the commentator for the league, helping you understand what is happening in the battles. I would like to say I am Elite 4 level, but I don't like to brag, said a semi-handsome man with an innocent smile. Master Trainer 67, bruh, you lost in the first round of the league last year. What Elite 4, more like an elite loser. Pokebunga 111 happy smiley carrot. The comment above has my full support. +1. Master Trainer 67 at Pokebunga 111, I don't want your support. With a name like that, I might be persecuted by association. F***k off LOL. Conversations like this made James smile slightly. Oh, come on guys, don't be like that, I'm practically a genius, I mean, would they choose me if I wasn't? Master Trainer 67 I have no words, you sure are shameless. The reason they chose you is that all you can do is run your mouth. If you had even a fraction of that talent in battle, you would already be champion. Georgia Bubble Tarp at Master Trainer 67 LMAO. I know, right? This guy has no talent for battling. I heard he got like 95% on his Pokemon Academy final exam but tanked the practical, haha. I would like to say my ability to talk is unrivaled, and I'm glad I'm so famous in the academy. Even until today, I seem to have left a lasting effect on the teachers due to my brilliance. The comment section instantly went silent, they were speechless towards his shamelessness. His face was too thick. Anyway, I am here to share with you the promo videos the league has made for the top 5 contestants expected to reach the end of the league. First, Carlo. Carlo's music video began to play. It was pitch black for several seconds, suspense building up. A light suddenly turned on, shining down on a person sitting down on a stool. His orange hair and purple eyes made him stand out that much more. He had an Ultra Ball in his hand and a smile on his face. Tilda. 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 Simon, Alex and Fiona followed right after with their own videos. Fiona got a lot of attention because of her beauty. The song was a very slow acoustic piece, dancers came in, and the contrast of light made her look like an angel amidst the monotonous background. As the video ended, people waited expectantly for the 5th one, knowing full well who it was going to be, the dark horse. Was he going to show his face? Comments were flying in constantly as they yelled, pleading to quickly put it on. Each video had successfully stirred different emotions within the audience, and they were craving more of it now. The video began with only a pitch black screen reflecting the excited faces of the viewers. The desolate blue sky full of haze seemed to be morning. Lightning streaked across the skies amidst the thick clouds. Many silhouettes on the surface were running. Hurried and brief drum beats perfectly reflected the tense atmosphere radiating off the screen, palpable to the audience. In between the brief drum beats, a female voice began to sing as symphonic music and opera combined in the background. Some modern musical styles like EDM were blended in as well, giving off a wild and primitive vibe, as if ready to strike. In the music video, the scene of a prelude to battle unfolded with the two sides at a standoff. With the horrific crises of Pokemon everywhere, the building tension was surging and billowing, threatening to overflow. A figure leapt into the sky, like an eagle soaring through the clouds. At a glance, a Machamp, seemingly turning into a comet, gave off the impression of raw and explosive power barely contained beneath the surface, ready to blow up at any moment. With one foot, the falling figure trampled on the Blastoise at the front of the opposing group before brutally raining down blows from his boulder-like fists. Explosive drum beats, combined with the crackling electronic music, sounded like crisp claps of thunder. It was not the sound produced from the instruments but rather the image and temperament that resonated with the viewers who, in turn, produced that thunder-like sound in their own hearts. Soil and sweat splattered in all directions. Some splashed onto the giant Pokemon's face in between his eyes. This diverted the attention of the viewers to his eyes. That pair of eyes radiated immense battle aura, akin to the violent fury of a ferocious beast shaken awake from its slumber. A bone-chilling sensation crept down the spines of the viewers witnessing this scene. The shrill blare of a brass instrument signaled a variation as the string melody increased its vigor. The intense and frantic beats of the timpani portrayed an unyielding spirit. Frantic alternating of the brass rhythm and woodwind variations set a fierce and intense tone of confrontations and close-quarter combat. The immense and visually stunning images, coupled with the perfectly synced accompaniment, continuously battered the hearts and souls of the viewers. The four-armed Asura and the impenetrable shelled bastion collided violently against the dark and gloomy sky. Despite it being a virtual image, it brought about a realistic and overwhelming sense of suffocation that transcended common sense. Like the calm after a storm, the intensity of the music receded. Ethereal sounds of a zither interweaving with the soothing flute gave the flustered spirits of listeners a moment to relax. This was a time for peace. The two split for a moment, huffing and puffing, sweat and blood apparent on their faces and body. For a moment they reverted back to their cute baby forms, happily fighting without a care in the world. The image and score induced a feeling of warmth in people's hearts. With this sort of backdrop, it seemed as if a scene of peace and stability was about to unfold. But for those watching the projection, they understood through the music that peace without war was never truly peace, that happiness without sadness is merely a distorted reality, an illusion. This temporary period of peace was not the conclusion but a foretelling of the explosive finale that was to come. The music switched to a melancholy cello solo. The two Pokémon fought alongside each other, going through countless trials and tribulations, growing together, relying on each other in order to stand tall for the prosperity of their families against the tyrannical ruler pressing them into the ground. They shared laughs, joys, sadness and despair, holding on to each other in the depths of winter, and playing in the water to cool off from the blistering sun. In the projection, two small Pokémon stood silently amidst infinite mountains and plains gazing longingly at the heavens. Under the night sky adorned with stars, the magnificent aurora was like a bright and flickering flame lighting up the dark. The beating of a drum seemed to increase its intensity in layers, as if to emphasize a steadfast conviction. The image slowly faded and replaced with the figures of Machamp and Blastoise standing where they once stood all those years ago, when they vowed to become the strongest versions of themselves, to protect their friends and family. The flickering aurora gradually dissipated as night turned to day. Without any hint of reluctance, the two Pokémon turned around to leave, each heading in opposite directions. Their backs full of scars. Nobody but themselves knew that there was not a lot left in them. The next injury might be the last they could take before collapsing. Such was the burden they had to bear all those years. Machamp was welcomed home by his kind, Marchops running around, swinging their fists joyfully without care. The elderly were playing with them happily, lifting them up and swinging them around. He was embraced by his wife and children. Months went by until the fated day arrived. Seeing their chief walk towards the gate, the Machamps who were playing with the kids halted, and gently placed the innocent children on the ground. Even the elderly did so too, one of them tapping the forehead of the younger generation with his 2 fingers to prevent them from following. As he walked away, he exchanged fist bumps with his fellow comrades, the last vestiges of fighting spirit embedded in their chuckles as they followed their leader out of the village. He never once turned around, scared that he could not leave if he did so. The young children were puzzled observing the leaving figures. This was a safe place. The world outside was fraught with dangers. Why was everyone still leaving? The departing figures increased, joining the ranks of the leaving. All that was left were those old and weak who were incapable of continuous combat. A quick-paced string medley played, and paired with a unique sequence of electronic music, It set a tense atmosphere foreboding combat. The aerial view of the numerous figures against the background of the now snow-covered land formed a long, snaking line. The numbers were so great that it was not possible to see where the line began. A loud horn sounded along with the vigorous beats of the timpani. The increasing tempo and intensity washed away any downcast feelings. Alongside the dampening from the double bass and the woodwind score, the accompanying singing grew in stature. Just like the scene of the leaving procession, it was a display of extreme determination. Contained within was an immeasurable strength and will to push forward. The volume of the chorus gradually increased as the footage the home of the Machamp, crossing over mountains and hills. The rustling and flapping sounds made listeners imagine a harsh and chilly wind. In the projection, a greyish-blue figure was rushing across the land in leaps and bounds. In a flash, coming face to face with his old friend and now foe Machamp, Blastoise raised his steel-like arm and swung downwards, as if swinging an axe. Throwing caution to the wind, with an unrestrained fury, the two collided and fought for what would be their final time. The combination of explosive sounds and music was a constant barrage to the ears. Freed of any apprehension, the two sides gave in to their unbridled and frantic madness and clashed against each other. A fierce wind swept through the silhouettes of Pokémon in the fight for survival. Viewers could apparently even feel every impact as they flinched, tears welling up in their eyes as they watched on. They wanted to protest. Why did they have to fight? Why couldn't they become friends? The thundering timpani was followed by a frantic clash of acoustics. The arrangement that ensued was complicated. An amalgamation of classical symphonies, church music, electronic music, even a military march amongst many other contrasting musical styles. It was as if a volcano that had been dormant for millions of years had suddenly erupted, triggering a tidal wave that could blanket the entire world. The principal color of the footage had gradually changed from a stifling blue to a brilliant yellow glow, the color of the sun shining through a layer of clouds, the brilliance of an intense blaze. The brightness of the projection had doubled since the beginning of the projection and was getting stronger. When are living beings able to shine so brightly? When one has a burning desire. The projection faded slowly as the two old acquaintances finally let go of the last wisp of vitality within them as the deeply moving symphony came to an end. The screen went black, and a line of text appeared before the audience's eyes. The true soldier fights not because he hates what is in front of him, but because he loves what is behind him. A deep male voice gently rose from the darkness, giving direction to the audience's sense of loss. Battles bring us together. It is a way of honoring the sacrifices our ancestors made that allowed us to live the way we do. It allows us to express ourselves, to scream towards the high heavens, releasing the pent-up desires within us as we strive to reach new heights. Those are the types of battles worth watching. That is art. The outline of a man soon came into focus. His head was blurred and distorted, but a clean black suit with a small red rose in his breast pocket was clearly visible before a white hand pierced through the darkness, stretching towards the audience invitingly. Do you wish to experience this? Come, join me. Welcome to my Pokémon world. The audience was silent, eerily silent in fact. Undecided on how they should begin to process what they had just watched. Compared to the other videos, the last one hit the hardest. The amalgamation of music styles created a vivid picture full of color and splendor, unlike anything they had ever seen before. Not to mention the perfectly choreographed music video that brought forward another layer of impactful imagery capable of pushing the audience who were already teetering at the edge right off completely. A cascade of emotions caused turmoil in their minds, discombobulating them for several moments. Even the rowdy announcer James was silent, unable to commentate on what he had just witnessed for a long while. "I have just received confirmation, folks. Professor Robert Francis Xavier from the Academy of Music, renowned across the world for their legendary creations, has requested to join in on the live stream," James said solemnly. His usual shameless and cheeky self was nowhere to be seen. It appeared that even he had some restraint. By now, the audience would be berating him for it, but they were unusually quiet. "Professor Xavier, it is an honor to have you join us," James said cautiously. Respect laced his every word. "Please, the pleasure is all mine. After all, it is I who made such an unreasonable request," Xavier said amicably. James smiled and nodded. "What prompted you to request joining the live stream with such vigor?" Xavier laughed slightly, his face on the screen unable to hide the excitement that bordered fanaticism only seen in people who lived and breathed music. "I couldn't help myself. I initially tuned into the live stream because, like most people around the world, Pokémon battling is one of the core building blocks that make up our culture. We are quite the fanatics for it. So, like many others, I was intrigued about who the top 5 challengers of this year were, and even more so interested in the videos they were asked to produce. As a musician and composer, I am rather critical yet intrigued by what young people create. After all, nobody can confidently say they have experienced everything in the world, can they? Music, like many types of art, is inspired by our experiences. Much more so in music, since we introduce everyday sounds into our creations, refining them into something more. This video we have just had the privilege of listening to, I repeat, privilege, is a perfect example of the highest quality of music we are able to currently listen to. My colleagues and I are speechless as we listened," Xavier said slowly and sincerely. "I can understand the sentiment, but as someone who is rather ignorant towards the intricacies and nuances of music, as I'm sure some who are listening in are too, please enlighten us to what exactly makes this so good," James said in a very professional manner. The audience was nodding excitedly, eager to hear a pro in the music industry break it down for them. But they also made sure to remember how two-faced James was. He seemed to be very good at his job. So then why was he so goddamn shameless all the time? They would make sure to rip into him the next chance they had. I would be more than happy to do so. So, we have to start with the tone of the music video. We are not exposed to any music to begin with. This allows the audience to better transition into the video itself. It seems that the composer took the fact that their music video would be played right after someone else's when creating it. Moving on, we are shown the context of the whole song, a conflict between two parties. Conflict always incites deep emotions in people. After all, it's a very primal thing, relatable to everyone. Additionally, it perfectly fits the overarching narrative of the league, being that it's for a tournament based on battling. The tone itself is dark and serious. The female voice, the drums and the electronic music perfectly blend in to make one's heart race with anticipation. But it is a sort of solemn anticipation due to what we are exposed to see so far. The song starts very strong, establishing the intensity and importance of what is happening within the world they have created. What some might have missed though, is that there was a second set of drums beating in the background, varying in pace. That in itself is nothing major, but what makes it incredible, is that it accurately predicts and subsequently mimics the heart rate of the audience. The initial 20 seconds of the music video was to get the audience to that threshold before beginning to dictate our heart rates subconsciously using the drum beats. It is ingenious and unheard of. It plays tricks on the brain, causing it to unconsciously follow the established rhythm, which in turn allows the composer to manipulate our emotions with more ease. Xavier continued to break down the video, trying to make it as simple as he could. The audience, who was made up of mostly normal people that hadn't studied music, now had more appreciation for the song that transcended their previous thoughts on the song. It actually had a bit of science mixed into it, which astounded those like Xavier who studied music for decades. They had never even contemplated or entertained the thought of mixing two completely polar fields to create something remotely acceptable. Rex listened to the live stream with Elisa in his arms as they lay on the bed, her head perked up as she listened to Xavier's breakdown. He could smell the scent of shampoo as her slightly damp hair tickled his nose. They had just gotten out of the shower when the live stream happened. "I can't believe you were able to make something like this, Rex," she said, sounding like a little girl with a belly full of excitement and glee. Rex swore he could see stars in her eyes. After all, the female vocals used in the music video were done by Elisa herself. She was nervous but excited when he approached her about it. "I'll make sure to release all the information pertaining to the music video once everyone figures out who the dark horse is," he said reassuringly. He wanted Elisa to have the recognition she deserved and felt bad that he had to keep it under wraps in order to maintain the public anticipation at an all-time high. Elisa smiled slightly, before turning to Rex, gabbing his jaw and pulling it towards her before kissing him. The kiss lasted a long time before their lips parted, a string of saliva glistened under the light. "I couldn't care less about that, Rex. I'm just happy to partake in something with you," she said sweetly. She understood him perfectly, seemingly able to read his thoughts. They both seemed to have a tacit understanding of each other's behavior and thought patterns. Yet her face changed slightly, hardening almost. "Now put on my fashion show. I already missed the first few articles of clothing for this year's winter season." Rex chuckled heartily and pulled her back into his embrace, tightly binding her in between his arms as he changed the channel. "On to the league we go," he thought to himself. Waves would stir this year, and many things would change. Whether it was for the better, nobody would know, but he hoped so. Better yet, he strived to make it so. Pa 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 ba boom. Fireworks coated the sky in a blanket of color. Planes streaked across the open air leaving trails of colored smoke, and hot air balloons littered the backdrop, like lost toys that had escaped the grip of their little owners' hands. Beneath, a massive stadium stood, mighty and domineering, capable of comfortably holding hundreds of thousands at a time. Uncountable amounts of seats lined the insurmountable walls, and on the stage floating in the middle of the stadium, popular artists played famous songs, and dancers scattered on the floor like wild petals in the wind as they performed astonishingly mesmerizing choreography. Ernst. 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 The ground trembled as the crowd bounced and raved to the beat, swallowed by the party-like atmosphere that was relentlessly assaulting their senses, bombarding them with youthfulness, feeling free and full of vitality, a truly animalistic and raw experience. From the hot air balloons, spectators were able to see people continuously swarming into the stadium like ants. Specks of black trailed down to the base of Victory Road. On this road, an unsuspecting black motorcycle zoomed forward. A man in a black suit and helmet rode on top like a modern knight, with a mirrored visor and black gloves. His tie flew behind him with a small inconspicuous red rose adorning his breast pocket. He was a blur as he sped past the innumerable amounts of people who were too busy immersing themselves in the festive atmosphere unique to the most anticipated event of the year to notice him. That's right, the league had finally begun. An event that trumped any other in viewership. A staple of Pokémon culture, an event that shaped the minds of countless youths as they pursue fame and fortune, strength and influence. This was where warriors were forged, a survival of the fittest, where only the best trainer emerges and obtains the opportunity to face the best of the best. The current guardians of the regions, the Elite Four and the champion. This was the Indigo Plateau. ********. Vroom. The sound of an untamed animal roared to a stop at a secluded parking spot dedicated specifically for VIP members. The League had provided this for him after some discussion. They were by no means happy with his previous actions, slightly resenting him at this point, but he would be providing them with more revenue. A small concession here was nothing. A luxurious small villa came into focus. This was where he would be staying until the league was over. Rex took his time observing the facilities, nodding from time to time in satisfaction. He made his way to the bedroom and directly to the mirror. He slowly took off the red rose and placed it in his pocket. He readjusted his tie, put on some cologne and waltzed out the door with light steps in the direction of the registration center. The Pokémon village was different to what it was in the anime as far as he remembered. As he walked down the smooth limestone footpath, framed with jade green grass at the sides, it gave him a futuristically polished feel. The villas were all very well built, with very aesthetic modern designs. Clearly, the architect focused on the visual appeal when creating them. It appeared that the housing was built on the side of an adjacent mountain, and the winding trail led to the base of the valley where the stadium was. Surrounding it though, were innumerable stalls full of food and hosted vast activities. Like a massive carnival, it was never-ending. Rex felt dizzy just trying to take it all in. There were too many people. The smell of cotton candy, hot dogs and smoke smothered his nose. The sound of indistinguishable but numerous voices around him drowned and confused him. The air felt dense as if he was being compressed merely by the number of people in one place. Yet there was order, nobody was pushing, and everyone was respectful. It was a sort of peaceful chaos. He spent the next hour, simply enjoying the many cultural delicacies that he didn't see at the previous carnival. At some point, however, he found himself in front of the registration area. It was swarmed by reporters and trainers. The difference between this place and all the others was palpable. Trainers exuded a different kind of aura, no matter how weak most of them might be compared to him. They had all passed at least 8 gyms and proved their worth as capable combatants. That in and of itself is an achievement to be proud of. They all had their own stories, they all went through their fair share of hardship and struggle in order to stand here. He by no means looked down on these people, instead respecting their hard work and dedication to the profession. They were all dressed differently. Some in tight-fitting convenient clothing meant for long-distance travel, some in more fashionable clothing and many other styles. But there was something that caught his eye. There were several people wearing a black suit like himself, but with one small difference. They all had a small red rose in their breast pocket. Rex was slightly stunned for a moment before chuckling to himself in amusement. It seems his video had generated quite the stir. He was sure he would gain fans, but to have them dress like him was still beyond his expectations. Some of them who were slightly stronger than the average and gave off some sense of mysteriousness were being interviewed. As he walked by them he couldn't help but listen in. "So, you're saying you are the mysterious dark horse who created the music video and is said to be the person to beat in this league?" The interview asked with a fake smile. Rex could tell the person didn't believe it at all but entertained the pretender anyway. Yet, he was more curious about why this guy was so confident in his judgment. That's right. My name is Chico, the best trainer of all. You wait and see, all these cannon fodder will not survive a single hit from my Pokémon. Not one, I tell you. The man with a buzz cut said while pointing at his chest with his thumb, proudly laughing as he did so. The interview's lips twitched slightly. He sighed internally and quickly wrapped up the farce of an interview. As he watched Chico walk away in wide and clumsy steps, he sighed again. But from the corner of his eye, he spotted a man with white hair looking over at him. The interviewer was surprised for a moment. His many years on the job allowed him to develop a knack for this sort of thing. Or so he liked to think. Others would disagree with him based on his track record. Yet they were too lazy to do anything about it. He thought that he might get lucky and unmask the dark horse before anyone else, becoming famous in that person's wake. Looking at Rex, he felt that there was something special about him. Rex, noticing he was spotted and quickly spun on his heels in an attempt to leave. Yet he didn't get far before someone tapped him on the shoulder. He hung his head down in defeat. Him and his stupid curiosity. Hello, my name is John Stewart, I was wondering if I could interview you. He asked as raised his black foam-coated microphone to Rex as he snapped his fingers to the cameraman, signaling for him to come over. Rex squinted momentarily before nodding. Yeah, sure. Perfect, first introduce yourself, what is your name, are you competing in the league? And if so, what is your goal? John bombarded suddenly. My name is Rex Pierce, I am indeed competing in the league. And like every person here, I hope to win the whole enchilada. Enchilada? What is that? John asked with a confused expression. Rex's lips twitched. I hope to win the whole thing is what I mean. He rephrased with an awkward smile. Ah, I get it. Looking at you now, are you perhaps imitating the famous Red Rose? John asked with sparkling eyes. Clearly, he was a massive fan. Rex quirked an eyebrow questioningly. Red Rose? He repeated in confusion. John was also surprised and nodded quickly. That is what they call you, due to the red rose you wear. But seeing it now, you seem to be missing his signature rose. He said, pausing when addressing Red Rose since he was supposedly interviewing someone who might be him. Rex understood and nodded. Yeah, nah, not really a fan, but I am interested in battling against him. John squinted slightly and gave Rex another once-over. If you don't mind sharing, what is your battle strategy? Or are you thinking of winging it? Rex smiled. I think I'll go with the flow, but winning will not be difficult at all. John gave a friendly smile but didn't take Rex's words seriously. After all, everyone was here for the same thing, and he had already heard that same sentence over a dozen times. John shook his head slightly in disappointment. It seemed that he would gain nothing more from this person. Ah. Right, thank you for your time. Good luck in your matches then. John said quickly before snapping his fingers at the cameraman again and dashing off to interview more people. Rex simply stared at his back as a cheeky smile spread across his face. He clearly doesn't take me seriously. Can't blame him in all honesty. But I wonder what his reaction will be. He mumbled to himself, all the while playing with the red rose in his left pocket. Ha! The kid's going to want to swallow his microphone when he finds out, I reckon. Mordred's voice suddenly sounded in Rex's head as a pair of eyes and a set of pearly white teeth appeared in his shadow inconspicuously. Ha ha! Maybe. But that kid with the buzz cut, what did he say again? Ah, take out his opponent's Pokémon in one move. What a fun idea! Rex mumbled with a relaxed expression as if he was not even affected by the infection and erratic emotions around him. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. Sis. Sis. I haven't been to the league in a while, this place is massive. Monica said as she skipped around in the massive hallway devoid of people with only a dozen paintings lining the walls, each with a man or woman standing alongside a full team of Pokémon. Many variations were present, but one thing each of them had in common was that they were all champions. A tall, slender, beautiful woman calmly followed the twins as they danced on the red carpet while observing the paintings with slight interest. A bewitching smile on her face as she did so. Her shoes let out muffled asterisk clack asterisk noise, her hips swayed, and her hair flowed. It is indeed, be careful about not hitting the paintings, they are special pieces. Irreplaceable. She said slowly. Do you think Big Brother Rex can have his painting here after this year? Jessica asked suddenly. Elisa shrugged in response as she arrived at the most recent painting. There, a young man stood with a Blastoise beside him that stood at a whopping 4 meters tall, a menacing grin on his face, powerful arms, and pillar-like legs. Yet she was one of the lucky ones to know that the painting was altered in order to hide a shocking secret. A memory of Rex's Machamp came to mind. She stood there silently, gazing at the painting before a grin slowly spread across her face. A sparkle of brilliance exploded out of her eyes momentarily. His final opponent is not someone ordinary. They call him the Immortal Bastion. The unshakable beast of Kanto, the monster in the shallows. He has only ever lost once, to a man so strong that the skies cried, the oceans wept, and the earth sobbed. Elisa said, her tone becoming increasingly solemn. Monica's eyes shone brilliantly. What's his name? Elisa smiled as she turned to her younger sister. We do not speak his name, for it is very special. He can hear the innocent in their time of need from hundreds of thousands of miles away when they cry out his name, and he flies down on a dragon made of flame. Legend says his home is on the moon, and that he overlooks the earth as its protector. Everyone simply calls him One. There was a long bout of silence afterwards. That is too hard to believe, living on the moon. Sis, that cannot be true. Rex is already overpowered, his Arcanine and Machamp are already too strong to fathom. You're saying there is someone beyond that? Jessica said with extreme skepticism. Elisa chuckled, maybe, anything is possible, but Rex is also someone with unfathomable might. He might even be stronger. My, just arrived and already bad-mouthing people, said a playful deep male voice. Elisa jolted and turned around in the direction of the sound. There, a man stood, wearing blue and orange with a black cape. His spiky red hair made him extremely conspicuous. Uncle Lance! She yelled, sprinting in his direction and launching herself at him with her arms spread wide like a child dashing toward their parent. Lance spread out his arms and embraced the young girl in a tight hug. He lifted her up and spun a few times, letting out deep chuckles full of tenderness as he did so. Composing herself, Elisa let go and stared at the older man with a wide smile. Uncle Lance! I haven't seen you in a while. How have you been? Bam! The side of a hand struck the top of Elisa's head sternly. I told you to stop calling me that. I'm 27 this year, not goddamn 40. No respect. He barked angrily, a tight frown on his face. Elisa rubbed her head with tears in her eyes, a puppy-like expression present. Upon seeing that look, Lance's face began to completely twitch as his frosty exterior melted. How could he stay angry at this girl? It was frustrating. Noticing that her ploy was a success, she instantly brightened up, with no signs of her previous tears anywhere. The change caused Lance to release a tired sigh. Learn your lesson. Now, don't change the subject. You cannot fathom the power of one. Don't compare him to some brat still wet behind the ears. It's inappropriate and very rude. He scolded seriously. Elisa's smile faded as she stared at Lance. She stepped towards him slowly and quietly. That atmosphere got colder and colder, her gaze frosty and sharp. There are two kinds of people in this world. Those who are weak, and those who are strong. That brat, as you call him, has transcended the realm of simply strong. You have no idea what he is capable of, uncle. Watch yourself, or you will be crushed before you can even regret it. He will be the champion. It is not a possibility, but an eventuality. Comparing one to Rex is already a compliment to the former, she said with complete confidence. Lance stood there silently, listening. He simply stared into her eyes as she talked. He could tell she meant every word, and he knew that if he was to insult this kid further, she would probably explode on him. He had been with her since she was born. He knew her better than she knew herself. Yet what he couldn't understand was what could make her act like this. His interest in the kid was slightly elevated. Yet it was far from enough to make him take the brat seriously. Elisa also knew this, so she didn't push further and instead walked past him without looking in his direction again. You will face him, and when you do, you will understand what total oppression is. You have been warned. She left those parting words and exited the hallway. Lance didn't really bother listening seriously. He registered her words, but she was still too weak for her words to hold any weight. He ran his fingers through his hair while exhaling a sigh. Kids these days, he commented. A shadow stood still behind a nearby corner, unmoving as they listened. Their sharp eyes flashed with a tinge of interest that disappeared as fast as it had arrived. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. By now, the stadium was completely filled. People were even standing outside, looking on from the massive screens on the side of the building. The music was getting progressively louder. A series of claps rang out, increasing in pace alongside the deep thump of the drums. The electric guitar was smashing out a score, and the snare was buzzing continuously. The enchanting and ethereal tone of a female artist hit the hearts of everyone present. As the song ended, spotlights lit up suddenly, projecting their light onto the stage. Fog began to accumulate as the dancers and artists disappeared within. The soft echo of a heartbeat was the only sound being heard. The vibrations alone made the chairs in the stadium rattle. Trumpets exploded alongside a steady drum beat, and with it, a violin played a slow but escalating piece. What does it mean to be a trainer? An electronic voice was heard, startling the listeners. It was eerie and solemn, yet it couldn't hinder the bubbling excitement in the audience. In fact, the opposite happened. Trainers are the backbone of our culture. But who represents this group of exalted people? Some think that it is only those who are capable of entering the league. Some think it is only those who have made a name for themselves. Dozens of similar yet different trains of thought just like those exist. Yet, they are all wrong. The moment you picked up your first Pokeball, the moment you first fought alongside your Pokémon, the moment you lost your first fight, the moment you won your first battle, the moment you shared your first meal, the moment you shed our first drop of blood together. They all make us trainers. We are all trainers, we all share a bond with our Pokémon. Today, we pay our respects to our partners, our friends, and our family. Pokemon are the reason we have what we have today, and we must learn to cherish their companionship now and forever. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the annual and most esteemed event of the year. The Indigo Plateau, where dreams become a reality. Let us welcome our host, a member of the Elite Four, donning the title of Dragon Master, the guardian we all cherish and respect, the one, the only, Lance tilde tilde. Pa. 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 Fireworks drowned the sky in blue and orange that quickly took the form of a dragon made of fire. The smoke parted to reveal a tall man with red hair, and a brilliant smile on his face as he waved enthusiastically at the audience. Welcome. I am honored to host this year's league tournament. Today is the start of the yearly competition, one that will once again crown an undisputed champion who will gain the opportunity to challenge the Elite Four and beyond. Today, we come together as people of our region, to support our brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers, daughters and sons as they tackle the mightiest of challenges. Today, we support them with our roaring cheers, our thunderous applause, and our inextinguishable passion. Today, we witness struggle, sorrow, happiness, joy, anger. We accompany these brave contestants as they strive to make history, as they scale the mountain of adversity. Today, under the light of the blazing sun, we witness the future. Lance yelled passionately, spreading his arms wide. His neck was red, and his veins bulged with a fiery passion. Boom! Deafening applause threatened to destroy the stadium as the audience cheered until their throats turned hoarse. A cacophony of chants was bellowed out in a stunning show of human and Pokemon passion. Rex stood amongst the audience, silent and still like a stone. He watched this single moment of perfection, where everyone put down their differences, and came together for the sole purpose of cheering on their fellow humans and Pokemon. Tap. 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 Tears streamed down his face and onto the ground, startling him. Memories of war, the horror and tragedies it brought and the sadness it caused. All to catch a momentary and fleeting glimpse of what he had the privilege of currently witnessing. A peaceful smile made its way to his lips. Contestants, the stage is yours. Lance yelled, drawing everyone's attention back to him again. Show us the fire that dwells within you. Show us the hardship you have gone through to stand here today. Show us the might of a trainer worthy of representing the future of humans and Pokemon. Give us a battle worthy of our passion. Lance, leader of the Elite Four, officially announced the beginning of the. He shouted briefly before being cut off. Whoosh! A massive flame shot into the sky, blue in color. Scraee! The cry of a bird sounded within as the fire coalesced into the shape of moltres, which flapped slowly in place, radiating a mighty aura. Everyone including Lance was surprised. Yet, Lance, being the experienced man that he was, instantly composed himself and took hold of the opportunity. Go! Take charge of your own destiny, the fire of moltres burns within you, don't let down those whose hopes you carry on your shoulders. Indigo Plateau start tilde tilde. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. The 25th of November, year 200. The tournament that laid the foundation for the strongest trainer to ever live, has finally commenced. Journal entry completed. That's it, guy. Hope you like the video. Like, share and subscribe the channel for more such videos. And also tell me in the comment section down below if you have any recommendations. Thanks for watching.